Chapter 3382. I heard second senior brother say that some of the passages in the space vein are stable, while some are unstable. Stable ones can safely lead to other realms, while unstable ones are caused by the true chi and laws of different realms clashing against each other. Since it's a void storm, it's only natural that it's caused by instability. How could a stable passageway have something like that? This Xiao wants to find a void storm, so naturally, I have to choose an unstable passage. As for which passage was stable, Xiao Hua took out the wishful staff and hit it with all his strength to distinguish it. Cracks flashed in the space, indicating that it was unstable, and in the stable passage, the void could naturally withstand the weight of the wishful staff. Therefore, Xiao Hua easily chose the leftmost passage, and the golden brilliance in this passage was more intense. Gods and Buddhas all over the sky. Xiao Hua prayed in his heart. This disciple is a Buddhist disciple who wants to achieve the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit. Oh, you can take a look. This disciple's hair is now gone. For this void storm, this disciple has risked his life to come here. Don't let this disciple go empty-handed again. Xiao Hua secretly muttered in his heart, and at the same time, he redoubled his caution and slowly flew into the passage. Not only that, but Xiao Hua also calculated the time. If he went deeper and didn't see any void storm, he would make a prompt decision to turn back. Xiao Hua's choice was not wrong. The space within the tunnel was not stable. As Xiao Hua went deeper, indescribable spatial cracks began to appear, and there were even some small spatial collapses. Of course, the seemingly familiar fluctuations also became more and more concentrated, and bitingly cold gales began to wreak havoc in the space. When a gust of strong wind coincidentally hit Xiao Hua's body, it cut a small scar on his body that had just recovered. Xiao Hua was stunned. No, that's not right. This void storm, didn't it directly crush this Xiao's body? It is more powerful than the invisible brilliance just now. How can it crush the earth crystal Yao milk? Is it possible that it is not only the earth crystal Yao milk that was crushed, but also the body? No, that's impossible, right? If so, how can a light baby beast survive? Light beasts are not phoenixes. They can't be reborn from blood, right? Besides, even if light beasts can be reborn from blood, this Xiao can't. There's no way the light beast wouldn't know about this, right? Forget it. Xiao Hua saw that the fluctuations in front of him were becoming more and more violent. A few gusts of wind blew against his face, causing him to feel pain. Xiao Hua felt that his future was not good. He immediately beat the drum of retreat in his heart. However, just as this thought appeared in his mind, a chaotic fluctuation that was even more scattered than falling leaves rushed over. This fluctuation was extremely irregular and without any warning. It instantly passed through Xiao Hua's body. Swoosh! Xiao Hua's body suddenly disappeared. At the same time, some of the earth crystal Yao milk also turned into pure natural power. Wave. Ripple. Xiao Hua was overjoyed at the unexpected good news. He finally understood. This void storm is not a real storm, but a chaotic fluctuation. Only the chaotic power vibration could penetrate into his body and shatter the earth crystal Yao milk, which was condensed from natural powers. As long as I fly further in, the more chaotic power vibrations there are, the more the earth crystal Yao milk inside my body can be activated. As a result, Xiao Hua was not in a hurry to retreat for the time being. Instead, he continued to fly forward, hoping to encounter even more chaotic fluctuations. However, when Xiao Hua encountered a few more waves of chaotic fluctuations, an ominous feeling once again emerged from the bottom of his heart. Crap, what's going on? Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed and hurriedly opened his transcendence vision. Not good. When Xiao Hua could clearly see the front of the passage, a golden smoke appeared in the air. How could he not know that he had really encountered a void storm? Damn it, although I need a void storm, but there's no need to make such a big fuss, right? I'm afraid this void storm can drown the entire passage. How can I withstand it? Drown the passage? Then, doesn't that mean this passage is going to completely collapse? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was once again stunned. He looked around the passage with an inconceivable gaze. Sure enough, the blue-green passage had already cracked and many thin lines had appeared. Run! How could Xiao Hua not know that he had fallen into another danger? Without saying anything further, he stopped moving and was about to escape. Xiao Hua's thoughts were extremely fast. But how could he be faster than heaven's might? Just as he stopped, an earth-shattering tremor spread throughout the entire passage. In an instant, it overtook Xiao Hua and rushed towards the fork in the road that Xiao Hua had just entered. Not good. This tremor has reached the end of the passage and will definitely turn back. This passage was originally unstable, so it will definitely start to collapse from the end of the passage. Sure enough, Xiao Hua's thoughts were correct. He had just turned around and flew several meters when a kind of world-destroying aura, a kind of rumbling sound of vibration, was born in his mind, in his transcendence vision. In front of Xiao Hua, at the beginning of the passage, a smoke-like cloud of dust rose up and rushed toward Xiao Hua. Before leaving Black Wind Ridge yesterday, why didn't I look at the almanac? Xiao Hua was greatly regretful. It must have written on it that everything is not good. Or is it not good? Grumbling was grumbling, but Xiao Hua did not dare to stay in the collapsing space for too long. He hurriedly turned around and rushed towards the end of the passage. Woo-woo! Although there was no sound in the void, the howling wind was once again produced in Xiao Hua's mind, constantly tormenting Xiao Hua. Swish! Another turbulent wave, which was like a storm, passed through Xiao Hua's body. A part of the earth crystal Yao milk was instantly shattered and absorbed by Xiao Hua's body. Right after that, large and small turbulent waves blew one after another like a cool breeze. Although the earth crystal Yao milk in Xiao Hua's body was shattered piece by piece, Xiao Hua's face did not show any joy, because from these turbulent waves, Xiao Hua had already sensed that a storm was coming. The change happened even faster than Xiao Hua had expected. After only a few breaths of time, a violent vibration came from Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua felt as if his internal organs were being rubbed by a pair of giant hands. Right after that, the entire void passage began to vibrate as well. Xiao Hua hurriedly opened his magic eyes and immediately saw that not far away, the blue-green light was collapsing like a collapsing wall, falling down section by section. In front of this falling light, there were a few exceptionally bright rings of light, which were rushing over from afar at an even faster speed than the streams of light. Xiao Hua originally wanted to fly forward, but seeing this situation, he knew that this void passage was collapsing from both ends. If he wanted to escape, he could only find an opportunity in the middle of the passage. Therefore, he hurriedly activated his power, which had already begun to recover gradually, and flew towards a place that he believed to be safe. Although Xiao Hua was flying much faster than before, how could he be faster than these waves of energy? Only after flying for tens of zhongs from Xiao Hua's left hand, tens of thousands of disordered waves of energy rushed over like stormy waves. Those waves of energy, which seemed to be able to drown everything, seemed to not be inferior to the torrents Xiao Hua had seen at the beginning. The void is dangerous. Xiao Hua's heart trembled incessantly, but his mind was still clear. The heaven's eye of the Dharma eye was activated to the extreme, and the perception of the void was also activated to the extreme in order to find a trace of survival in this crisis. Like a tsunami storm in the closed sea, the void storm instantly slammed Xiao Hua into the collapsed passage. Those waves of energy were like waves of the sea that battered Xiao Hua's body. Swish, swish, swish. Xiao Hua's Taoist robe turned into powder and disappeared. In the pitch-black void, an indescribable brilliance could still be seen on the surface of Xiao Hua's body. When the waves of energy came into contact with Xiao Hua's body, many of them were actually blocked, and only 40% of them penetrated into his body. Like washing away the mud on Xiao Hua's body, it instantly transformed the earth crystal Yao milk in Xiao Hua's body, meridians, and upper and lower dantian, into pure earth attribute heaven and earth spiritual qi. Great! Xiao Hua felt his body go limp, as well as the pressure that was heavier than a mountain. He didn't have the slightest bit of strength to resist, and even his body was collapsing slightly. He smiled bitterly and could only praise his own misfortune. That's right, the problem of the Earth Crystal Yao milk was about to be solved, but the scale of this void storm was far beyond what he could bear. Perhaps when the Earth Crystal Yao milk completely transformed into heaven and earth spiritual chi, his body would also collapse, and his flesh would begin to melt away, right? Although Xiao Hua had just used the blood drop paradise to resist the nameless brilliance, this void storm was different from before. This kind of monstrous devastation was far from what the previous silence could compare to. Xiao Hua didn't feel that his Devil Realm cultivation method could resist anything. Swoosh! Another wave-like fluctuation rushed into his body. This fluctuation came too strangely, because this fluctuation was comparable to a flood peak between the two other fluctuations and was close to being in between movement and stillness. If Xiao Hua wasn't very sensitive and familiar with fluctuations, he wouldn't have been able to sense it. However, when this fluctuation entered his body, the Earth Crystal Yao milk didn't move at all. However, when this fluctuation rushed into Xiao Hua's lower dantian, Xiao Hua's huge gold core, which was like an invisible nebula, suddenly shook. The edges of the nebula began to flicker with strands of star-like luster. After that huge fluctuation rushed into the gold core, it didn't move at all, as if it was absorbed by the nebula gold core. When the fluctuation disappeared, the entire gold core shook violently. In the center of the countless tiny gold cores that couldn't be seen by the naked eye, a fluctuation similar to the previous fluctuation suddenly appeared. This fluctuation condensed into a point, flashing with intense brilliance. There were many tiny gold cores in the nebula gold core. In the beginning, the fluctuation was slightly chaotic, but in a few breaths, all the fluctuations became uniform. Moreover, the moment the brilliance in the center of these gold cores became uniform, it immediately turned into an oval-shaped halo that bloomed from the center of the gold core, as brilliant as fireworks. Chapter 3383. Many rings of light rippled rapidly within the nebula gold core. The entire nebula gold core began to collapse, just like the void passage Xiao Hua was in. This collapse also produced ripples, unexpectedly forming a resonance with the collapse of the void passage. Waves of ripples were also produced from Xiao Hua's body, becoming one with the void passage. Admittedly, it was this tiny body that was drifting around like a pellet in the collapsing tunnel, but it was also these two kinds of fluctuations that combined into one that protected Xiao Hua's body and allowed him to escape the calamity of losing his life. At the same time the ripples were produced from Xiao Hua's body, the gold core began to collapse, and then collapsed at an extremely fast speed. The direction of the collapse was precisely the trace of black and white light that suddenly appeared in the center of the nebula gold core. Once again, an obscure fluctuation appeared at the spot of light. This fluctuation was extremely slow, but it was also extremely vast and powerful. It was filled with traces of the way of the heavens. The moment it appeared, it was like a sudden clap of thunder in a thunderstorm. It instantly attracted all the fluctuations within the collapsed gold core into it. Pregnant with a baby? Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. He had read a lot of ancient books and also comprehended a lot of cultivation methods and experiences. He had even thought about the abnormalities of his pregnancy many times. However, he had never thought that he would be pregnant in the void. However, if he thought about it carefully, Xiao Hua once again felt the vastness of the heavenly Tao in this strange situation. His gold core was currently formless. On the hidden immortal continent, it was basically impossible for him to conceive a baby. In this void, the formless gold core revealed the shape of a nebula. If he didn't conceive a baby in the void, where could he conceive a baby? But, suddenly, Xiao Hua thought of a fatal flaw. There is no heaven and earth spiritual energy in the void. Why should I conceive a baby? Even if I know the dragon transformation art, even if I know the immortal body bestowment technique, what's the use? All of these are useless in the void. Right, there is no heaven and earth spiritual energy in the void, but this Xiao has a huge amount of earth crystal, Yao milk, in his body. This is the purest earth-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Xiaohua was like a drowning man who had caught a tree branch. He suddenly realized, but I don't know if this earth crystal Yao milk can support me to successfully conceive a baby. In a short period of time that Xiaohua was thinking, a powerful pressure came from his body and spread out in all directions. His divine sense also came out along with the pressure. Xiaohua felt that this pressure was incomparably powerful, and his divine sense was also extremely vast. However, in this void passage, although the two of them carried the power of the heavenly way, they seemed so insignificant. After just a few dozen feet, they were suppressed by the chaotic fluctuations and the power of space, forcibly compressed around Xiaohua. Of course, this kind of suppression didn't harm Xiaohua at all. On the contrary, it was even more beneficial. On one hand, the divine sense and pressure were the phenomena of a pregnant baby, and they carried the power of the heavenly way. The range that they should have been able to cover was suppressed by the power of the heavenly way. They would be able to use the power of the heavenly way to grow and reach their own range. While competing with the power of the void passage, the pressure and divine sense would inevitably grow beyond Xiaohua's imagination. This kind of opportunity was not something that all cultivators could think of or encounter. On the other hand, the pressure and divine sense were compressed around Xiaohua, forming an extremely powerful defensive buffer. The destructive power of the collapse of the void passage was also not something that Xiaohua could imagine. Something even more powerful than the previous torrent could still kill Xiaohua, and under the protection of this defensive buffer, Xiaohua was able to safely escape. Xiaohua naturally didn't think of this for the time being. As soon as the pressure appeared, he sensed it and knew that he could conceive a baby. Almost without thinking, he waved his hand with great difficulty and put the nascent pregnancy pill he obtained from the Seven Suns Temple's golden steel into his mouth. As soon as the nascent pregnancy pill entered his mouth, it immediately turned into spiritual energy and rushed into Xiaohua's lower dantian with a faint fluctuation. At this moment, in Xiaohua's lower dantian, the collapsed golden nebula core had already stopped when it was half a foot in size. The originally tens of thousands of tiny golden cores had now all disappeared, and even the small golden cores formed from the male and female inner cores had turned into speckle-like fluctuations. As for the fluctuations within the golden nebula core that contained the traces of the heavenly way, it was still flickering methodically. It slowly swept through these fluctuations, passed through the golden nebula core, and rushed out of Xiaohua's body. A faint fluctuation from the nascent pregnancy pill fell into the lower dantian and was attracted by the newly born fluctuations of the golden nebula core, sinking into the half-foot golden core. Wong. As soon as the fluctuation entered the golden core, the entire golden core immediately shook. The black and white speckles of light began to expand, and the golden nebula core began to collapse and shrink again. Following the change of the golden nebula core, an even stronger suction force was born from the invisible golden core. Not only was the medicinal power of the nascent pregnancy pill sucked into the golden core, even the residual true qi in the meridians was sucked into the golden core. What made Xiaohua feel gratified was that this suction force was so strong that although it couldn't suck away the earth crystal Yao milk in the meridians, at the same time that the golden nebula core in Xiaohua's lower dantian changed. Following that invisible and soundless fluctuation, it rushed into Xiaohua's body like a tidal wave. The earth crystal Yao milk that was being washed over and over again turned into waves of heaven and earth spirit qi. These heaven and earth spirit qi were all sucked into the golden nebula core to nourish the nascent soul. However, it only moved for a moment before the fluctuation was assimilated by the other fluctuations in the golden core and disappeared. Although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the vital energy of heaven and earth were continuously sent into the golden core, the entire nebula golden core stopped moving. Xiaohua, who had been nervously observing, finally understood. He threw the nascent pregnancy pill in his hand into his mouth one after another, maintaining the spirit chi and fluctuations of the golden core. Right now, the void was abnormally chaotic. Violent fluctuations and strange splendor rose and fell one after another. The collapse not only destroyed the void passage Xiaohua was in, but it also spread out in all directions. It seemed as if the entire network of space was affected by it. As for Xiaohua, he was like a drop of water in the vast ocean, drifting with the waves. He didn't know where his future was. There was a saying in Buddhism, a flower, a world, a drop, a space. Xiaohua was like that at this moment. No matter how dangerous the outside world was, he only silently guarded his heart. With a single thought, he became a nascent soul, paying no attention to the madness of the outside world. He didn't know how long it took. Xiaohua had taken a total of 1440 nascent pregnancy pills. Only then did he see the black and white splendor collide with the outline of the golden nebula core. At this moment, the golden nebula core was about half a chi. The instant the two collided, it was as if the heavenly thunder had attracted the fire of the earth. It emitted lightning like a thunderbolt. Moreover, the golden nebula core contained the inner cores of the male and female lightning beasts. Lightning instantly filled the entire golden nebula core. At the same time, the black and white splendor rushed into the golden nebula core, and the golden nebula core was dyed black and white. Ka. A crisp cracking sound emerged in Xiaohua's heart. The black and white splendor, together with the golden nebula core, cracked. At the same time, an even stronger fluctuation than before rushed into Xiaohua's body. The remaining earth crystal Yao milk was completely shattered. It rushed through his meridians and rushed into his lower dantian, rushing into the shattered golden core. The strange thing was, after this huge amount of earth attribute heaven and earth spiritual chi rushed into the golden core, it actually turned into clusters of tiny fluctuations. It was like 100 birds returning to their nest, clustered in the center of the golden core. As the fluctuations increased, the fluctuations in the center of the black and white splendor suddenly stopped. Xiaohua's body suddenly became still. Xiaohua felt that his thoughts were also stagnated. When Xiaohua's thoughts were able to move again, a half-chi long baby shadow was born in the black and white splendor. Void nascent soul. Xiaohua's heart was in ecstasy. He immediately understood that he had already completed the crucial step of conceiving a nascent soul. His nascent soul had already been created from nothing. Now, as long as he used the heaven and earth spiritual chi to enrich this shadow, he would be able to conceive a nascent soul. The process of filling the shadow was naturally the process of forming a nascent soul. This was easy in the Dawn Rain continent, or even in the hidden immortal continent, where the pressure was and the range of the divine sense. There would certainly be countless heaven and earth spiritual chi condensed into crystal beads and rushed into Xiaohua's body. With Xiaohua's current cultivation, there would even be a large amount of spiritual chi coming from all directions. However, the current Xiaohua was in the void. Where would the heaven and earth spiritual chi come from? The earth crystal Yao milk in his body had already been completely exhausted, and there was not much nascent soul pills left. He could no longer use them. The only thing Xiaohua could rely on was the nearly endless supply of spiritual grasses in his space. Roar! An indescribable cry sounded. Xiaohua suddenly raised his head. He saw that above his head, a several zhang tall spiritual image doppelganger had appeared. It had the same appearance as the shadow in his lower dantian. My goodness, this is the void. With so much pressure, the spiritual image doppelganger is still several zhang tall. If it was in the hidden immortal continent, how tall would it be? Xiaohua was somewhat aghast. He hastily took out some spiritual grasses from his space and put them into his mouth. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua's little calculation was wrong again. These spiritual grasses might have been very old, and the heaven and earth spiritual qi they contained was not much. However, if he used this method to supply the nascent soul, he would be unable to make ends meet. The heaven and earth spiritual qi contained in several stalks of spiritual grasses filled Xiao Hua's meridians to the point of choking. Even if he used the dragon transformation art, it would not be able to produce the slightest change in Xiao Hua's nascent soul. Not good. Seeing that this path was blocked, Xiao Hua's complexion changed greatly. The only thing I can do now is to escape from this void. No matter what world this is, as long as there is heaven and earth spiritual qi, this Xiao can successfully conceive a nascent soul. However, Xiao Hua's thoughts were very rich. This void was also very thin, not to mention that the void was currently collapsing and the storm was raging. Even if it was a calm void, how could he come and go as he pleased? What should I do? Xiao Hua's heart was burning with anxiety, but he was also at a loss as to what to do. Xiao Hua was distracted, and the spiritual grasses in his mouth became slack. His empty meridians no longer had a trace of true qi absorbed into his nascent soul. Damn it! Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. He understood in his heart that at this moment, his nascent soul needed an endless supply of spiritual qi. With this mistake of his, wouldn't the nascent soul that had already been condensed collapse? Chapter 3384. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, without the supply of true energy, the fake nascent soul didn't distort or collapse as Xiao Hua had expected. It didn't even change in the slightest. Instead, at the heart of the fake nascent soul, where the black and white brilliance fluctuated, that slow heartbeat like fluctuation paused for a moment, then changed its rhythm and firmly vibrated. Following this vibration, the fluctuation rushed out of the fake nascent soul and firmly spread in all directions. Xiao Hua was startled. He immediately sent in more spiritual herbs, but at this time, he was extremely sensitive to the changes in his surroundings. The numerous fluctuations that were originally blocked by the spirit statue Dharma body were now attracted by the fluctuations produced by his fake nascent soul. As the rhythm changed, they rushed into his body. The pressure and divine sense could not be stopped, and the body could not stop them either. Strand after strand, they all entered the fake nascent soul. Buzz. The influx of fluctuations caused the fake nascent soul to vibrate again. Dots of fluorescent light were produced in the fake nascent soul, as if a spirit tide was directly surging out of the fake nascent soul. Xiao Hua did not have any experience in pregnancy, but he had experience in producing Buddha relics. Seeing this, he immediately knew that the fluctuations were filling the nascent soul. Since his mind was calm, Xiao Hua immediately thought of the details just now and cursed inwardly. Damn it, didn't the fake nascent soul pill just enter the dantian? Moreover, the extremely large amount of spiritual energy and true energy that entered the dantian also turned into small fluctuations. In this void, I'm afraid the fluctuations are the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, right? It's just that although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was vast, the amount of fluctuations it turned into was extremely small, so I didn't notice it. My nascent soul is originally different from ordinary nascent souls, so it should be normal to use the fluctuations in the void to construct it. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua opened his Dharma eyes with difficulty. There was also the power of heaven and earth in the void. Xiao Hua's surroundings were confined for several hundred feet. However, the confinement of Xiao Hua's nascent soul realm seemed insignificant in the void, and even more insignificant in the void storm and the collapse of the passage. However, even so, Xiao Hua's transcendence eyes could see that within the chaotic darkness, a multicolored brilliance similar to the spirit tide was also emerging from the void. It flickered with a rhythm as it surged into Xiao Hua's body. What was special was that the spiritual idol was similarly absorbing a large amount of brilliance. This brilliance was once again pouring into Xiao Hua's body from the top of his head. After an unknown period of time, the void storm gradually stopped, and the collapse of the spatial tunnel also stopped. The void storm was originally a raging storm, but under the influence of Xiao Hua's pregnant baby, the destructive power of the storm increased by many times. Within the spatial meridians, it was unknown how many spatial passageways were destroyed by the storm. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua was unaware of all this. Within Xiao Hua's lower dantian, a 1-foot-long nascent soul gradually solidified, and at this time, Xiao Hua's physical body underwent another mutation. Xiao Hua activated the dragon transformation art, and his entire meridians began to tremble uncontrollably. Following the trembling of his meridians, his nascent soul also began to tremble. Tiny cracks began to appear in his nascent soul, and their positions coincided with his meridians. Vein sculpting? Xiao Hua was dumbfounded, and he almost blurted out in shock. There are meridians in the nascent soul's body. That's right, in Xiao Hua's understanding. The nascent soul of the Tao sect was the condensation of heaven and earth spiritual energy. It could directly control spiritual energy, so why would it need meridians? Furthermore, in the records of the nascent soul cultivation method that he obtained, there was never any mention of reconstructing meridians. Instantly, Xiao Hua thought of the scene he saw when he first dual cultivated with Fairy Hong Xia. That was all the meridians in the body. At the same time, there were many places where the dragon transformation art had not been cultivated. Since the nascent soul wants to reconstruct its meridians, then this Xiao will reconstruct all of these meridians. Seeing this, how could Xiao Hua not know that this was an excellent opportunity for him? He immediately controlled his mind and used all his strength to control the dragon transformation art. Along with the trembling, the meridians in his memory were revealed bit by bit. At the same time, they were being reconstructed in the nascent soul's body. In fact, it was not that ordinary cultivators did not reconstruct their meridians. However, they only had 2 meridians, one yin and one yang. One connected to the heavens, and the other connected to the earth. Even if it was reconstructed, it would be a matter of an instant. Perhaps there were records in the earliest nascent soul cultivation method, but with the passage of time, this had already become common knowledge. Just like how there were only 12 layers of qi refining cultivation methods, no one would investigate further, and no one would reconstruct other meridians. Of course, even if there were people who wanted to reconstruct their meridians, the vast majority of them would end up with their nascent soul destroyed. Who would think of something else at the crucial moment of forming their nascent soul? In particular, the human body's meridians were originally balanced. One more or less meridians would cause the nascent soul to collapse. For someone like Xiao Hua who knew about the meridians of the entire body, it could be said that there was no precedent in the past or in the future who would walk this dangerous path that was close to no return. Reconstructing meridians was even more dangerous than forming a nascent soul. The time required was much longer, and the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy needed was much greater. The fluctuations within Xiao Hua's nascent soul rushed straight into the depths of the void, attracting even more fluctuations. In the depths of the spatial meridians, the aftermath of the tunnel's collapse had just calmed down. The pitch-black void slightly distorted. At this moment, the fluctuations swept past, and a faint whirlpool suddenly appeared in the void. The fluctuations rushed into the whirlpool and were immediately swallowed by the whirlpool. The whirlpool became even bigger and flashed with a gray brilliance. When the gray brilliance covered the entire whirlpool, the whirlpool was already 1 foot in size. At the bottom of the gray brilliance, a pitch-black dot condensed. The pitch-black seemed to have shattered, and a thumb-sized tentacle stretched out from the inside. Then, like a silkworm breaking out of its cocoon, another tentacle stretched out from the other side of the shattered void. Ka-ka! Even though there was no sound, the void looked very thin and brittle. In an instant, cracks appeared from the whirlpool. Then, a strange head stretched out from the two tentacles and curiously twisted a few times. Then, it opened its sawtooth-like mouth and began to chew on the left side of the whirlpool. The whirlpool was unexpectedly swallowed by this strange insect. When the void next to the head was large enough, a body that was several feet long squeezed out from the void. Crunch, crunch. When this strange insect entered the void, it immediately let out a series of rumbling sounds. Its two gray wings suddenly spread out and it flew towards the direction of the fluctuations. Along the way, all kinds of fluctuations were swallowed by this strange insect, causing this strange insect to grow even larger. After the strange insect flew away, the cracks in the void quickly healed. When it returned to its original state, another tentacle stretched out from the last crack. Unfortunately, this tentacle stretched out several times but was unable to reach out from the crack. In the end, it was forcefully pushed back into the crack and disappeared. Xiao Huan naturally didn't know that the fluctuations of his yuanying had attracted an uninvited guest. At this moment, he had already successfully reconstructed the meridians of his yuanying. The entire dragon transformation art had slowly stopped. This was also a phenomenon that Xiao Hua had never experienced since he started cultivating the dragon transformation art. A sense of exhaustion emerged not only from Xiao Hua's meridians, but also from his nascent soul and physical body. Everyone else only reconstructed 2 meridians, but Xiao Hua had reconstructed the meridians of an entire human body. The amount of spiritual sense and concentration he expended was far greater than that of an ordinary cultivator. If it weren't for the fact that Xiao Hua had cultivated the sun-shrouding art, the dragon transformation art, and the support of his 10 primordial spirits, he definitely wouldn't have succeeded in something that even Grand Ascension stage cultivators wouldn't dare to attempt. AI, other people's nascent souls, probably only have 2 meridians. At this moment, Xiao Hua had already comprehended something. If my nascent soul has so many meridians, then wouldn't my cultivation speed be 100 times faster than others? Feeling his nascent soul and meridians stop resonating, Xiao Hua felt like he was about to collapse. However, under the might of the heavens, he still sat cross-legged in the void. The nascent soul and meridians stopped resonating for only a moment. Then the surface of the nascent soul trembled slightly. This trembling was very subtle, and Xiao Hua almost didn't want to pay attention to it. However, just as the trembling was about to disappear, Xiao Hua suddenly woke up. If it weren't for the fact that he was in the void and was suppressed by the might of the heavens, Xiao Hua almost jumped up and down. Damn it, this is a chance for a nascent soul cultivator to reconstruct his physical body. How could I waste it? However, just as Xiao Hua was about to control the vibration of his nascent soul to reconstruct his physical body, he hesitated again and thought, do I have to reconstruct my body to be as handsome as second senior brother? Damn it, that guy is already a handsome freak. Even if I reconstruct my body, I can't surpass him. Since that's the case, why should I compete with him? Do I have to reconstruct my body to look like Zhang Xiaohua? But Xiaohua's small nose and small eyes, aren't they too ugly? Since I have a devil statue to look like Xiaohua, I don't have to look like him anymore, right? After thinking about it, in the end, Xiaohua couldn't bear to part with his current stinky skin and decided to reconstruct his appearance to look like a 24 or 25-year-old. After all, an 18-year-old face was too delicate, giving people a kind of immature feeling. Sigh so pitiful. Xiaohua touched his smooth cheeks, then touched his bald head that was even brighter than his cheeks, and said with a bitter smile, being handsome is also troublesome. Even if I'm reconstructing my physical body while pregnant, I still have to face a huge problem. Just as Xiaohua was indulging in his narcissism, all the phenomena of the pregnant nascent soul and heavens might came to an end. The collapse of the passage and the storm in the void also came to an end. However, the heavens might gradually dissipated, and the pressure that Xiaohua released slowly retracted. At the same time, The countless fluctuations that were attracted by the fluctuations of Xiao Hua's nascent soul crazily poured into Xiao Hua's body like a spirit tide. That huge spirit statue also gradually entered Xiao Hua's body along with these fluctuations, gradually fusing with the solemn nascent soul. When the spirit statue fused with the nascent soul crawled out from the top of Xiao Hua's head. Although there were endless storms and countless fluctuations in the void under the heaven's might, the nascent soul's location was also extremely stable. The nascent soul pointed one hand to the sky and the other to the ground and sang, "Heaven and earth, 9 directions, soul and spirit. One lotus throne, one soul burning the soul, one heart of the 5 Qis cleansing the mundane, one Taoist master with 7 refinements." Chapter 3385. When the nascent soul finished singing, it opened its mouth, and the surrounding brilliance turned into a waterfall and fell into the nascent soul's body. The nascent soul seemed to be extremely satisfied and laughed. "From now on, I will be called Taoist Master Xiao." Before its voice fell, the nascent soul's figure shrank and disappeared into Xiao Hua's bald head. The brilliance of the void disappeared, and the fluctuations also subsided. Everything indicated that Xiao Hua's trip to the void had been successful. Xiao Hua's heart was even more calm. The nascent soul formed a seal and closed its eyes to rest. It seemed that the meridian sculpting and body sculpting just now had consumed a lot of its energy. Xiao Hua slightly closed his eyes. A very strange, yet familiar feeling arose in his heart. The nascent soul could be considered as a doppelganger of Xiao Hua, but Xiao Hua didn't split his own primordial spirit to the nascent soul. However, this nascent soul gave Xiao Hua a kind of feeling. This feeling was similar to his own primordial spirits. Of course, Xiao Hua was used to seeing the green-robed Xiao Hua and the soul cultivator Xiao Hua. "Oh, not good." Suddenly, Xiao Hua opened his eyes, and the nascent soul in his lower dantian also opened its starry eyes. All 4 eyes flashed with panic. This Xiao is indeed a pregnant nascent soul, and has crossed an unimaginable abyss. Now, I can be considered a grandmaster. However, this is a spatial vein, and this Xiao only has 3 days. With such a large-scale storm in the void, how can it possibly stop in 3 days? This Xiao's nascent soul is not just 3 days, I'm going to die. Hurry up and find. Unfortunately, before Xiao Hua could raise his eyes to look around and use his sense of space to find the direction, an indescribable feeling of horror suddenly arose. In particular, the nascent soul that had just been born trembled and curled up into a ball, seeming to be extremely terrified. Xiao Hua raised his head and narrowed his eyes. The pupils in his eyes had already shrunk into a ball. He looked straight at a place in the void. There was nothing special in that place. However, in just half a cup of tea's time, in Xiao Hua's vision, a gray ball appeared from the dark void. It was like a meteor in the night sky, flying toward Xiao Hua at an extremely fast speed. "See, there are still demonic beasts in the void." Xiao Hua was shocked, but he immediately felt relieved. Since the light beast could come to the void, other monsters in the 1,000 Demons sacred realm could certainly come. Since there were monsters in the 1,000 Demons sacred realm, people in the hidden immortal continent, and Buddhas in the pure land world, then what was so strange about demonic beasts in the void? Shocked, Xiao Hua hurriedly opened his eyes. Xiao Hua's brows furrowed. His brows furrowed, his brows furrowed. Xiao Hua frowned. Xiao's eyes. Xiao Hua's eyebrows were tightly wrinkled. Far away in the distance, there were some lights floating around. These lights were multicolored. They seemed to be the fluctuations left behind by Xiao Hua when she was pregnant. Not far from these lights, there was a gray ball of light that was 2 feet in size flying towards the lights. This gray ball of light was the image of a strange insect. Half of this strange insect was the head of this strange insect. On the head, there were 2 long tentacles. The tentacles were serrated and looked very sharp. Behind the tentacles were two fist-sized pitch-black spots. These pitch-black spots seemed to be made up of thousands of smaller pitch-black spots. If there was no accident, they should be the eyes of the strange insect. Looking at the other half of the strange insect, there was a slight bulge. Layers of gray patches were stacked together. It should be the body of the strange insect. The gray patches converged at the tail of the strange insect, condensing into a sharp spike several inches long. The spike emitted a dark gray color. Looking at the two sides of the strange insect's body, there was a pair of feather wings several feet in size. When they flapped, they emitted a black light. Under the wings, there were two hind legs several feet long, like a pair of halberds. Isn't this a locust? Xiaohua instantly connected this strange insect with the small insect that was commonly seen in the countryside. Oh, it's still a little different. Naturally, Xiaohua's transcendence vision couldn't see things that could be seen with the naked eye. Even if a person stood in front of Xiaohua, he might not be able to see them with his transcendence vision. But this strange insect that looked like a locust could actually be seen by Xiaohua's transcendence vision. This strange insect was naturally not a small matter. Moreover, when the strange insect flew to several spots of light, it opened its mouth, which took up almost half of its head, and chewed up the light with a few bites. Then it spread its wings and flew elsewhere. The strange insect flew very fast, and the speed at which it ate was even faster. Before long, it had already closed the distance between it and Xiaohua. Not good. This strange insect seems to be coming for me. Looking at the strange insect swallowing the light all the way, whether it was to the left or the right, but the direction it was flying in was his direction. Even the light that was slightly further away from its flight path was not eaten by the strange insect. Xiaohua immediately understood that this was the result of the fluctuations he used to form his nascent soul. Run! This was already the third time Xiaohua tried to escape after falling into the void. Now that Xiaohua had just formed his nascent soul, the true essence in his meridians was abundant. With a thought, his nascent soul was filled with abnormally abundant magic power. Using the lightning evasion technique, he flew towards a place with a loud bang. When Xiaohua was in the late Aurus core stage, he had already broken through to the Imperial Lightning Evasion technique. Now that he had formed his nascent soul, his lightning evasion technique had also improved. When he just started, he was still in the early stage of the Imperial Lightning Evasion technique, but with the infusion of magic power, his speed actually became faster and faster, gradually approaching the late stage. Although there was no sound in the void, the lightning flashing around Xiaohua's body was very dazzling in this pitch-black void. Although Xiaohua was fleeing with all his might, his transcendence, I was still vigilantly staring at the strange insect's location. Seeing that he had used the lightning evasion technique to escape, the strange insect did not detect him at all and was still leisurely eating the light. Xiaohua's heart first relaxed. As long as this strange insect that caused him to tremble didn't chase after him, everything would be fine. Unfortunately, just as Xiaohua was feeling relieved, the strange insect suddenly seemed to wake up. It abruptly raised its head, and its pitch-black eyes were like colored glass reflecting a black brilliance, flashing with a layer of black light. Soon after, the strange insect's two hind legs stomped, and a strange gray brilliance flashed, and the strange insect actually disappeared without a trace. Xiaohua was stunned. In his transcendence, I hurriedly looked around. His heart once again gave birth to a bad feeling. Sure enough, after a few breaths of time, the strange insect's body appeared again, and this time it was already very far away from the place where it had just disappeared. What kind of divine ability is this? Is it teleportation? Xiaohua turned pale with fright once again. A few breaths of time, huh? Even if he used the lightning evasion technique, it was impossible to fly so far away. If this strange insect used a teleportation-like divine ability to chase after him, it probably wouldn't take long to catch up, right? Having already realized that his lightning evasion technique had attracted the strange insect's attention, Xiaohua hurriedly withdrew his lightning evasion technique, and switched to the commonly used wind evasion technique. However, there was no wind in this void, and Xiaohua could only rely on his transcendence energy to activate it. The normally handy wind evasion technique was inferior to an ordinary flight technique. When Xiaohua switched to the cloud riding technique commonly used by Confucian cultivators, the strange insect really stopped using the divine ability that made Xiaohua tremble with fear and switched to a pair of feather wings that were several feet long. But even so, the strange insect's flying speed still seemed to be faster than Xiaohua's by a third, and the distance between him and the insect slowly shrunk. Xiaohua already didn't have the time to think about where the strange insect came from, and also didn't have the time to think about why the strange insect was chasing after him. His transcendence vision was only looking forward. Although his transcendence vision was abnormally tired, he didn't dare to slack off in the slightest, because he felt that this strange insect was more formidable than the water flow, the brilliance of light, and even the void storm. If he was even the slightest bit careless, he might die in its mouth. At this moment, Xiaohua had already lost his perception of the space gate from before. Perhaps it was because the distance was too far, or perhaps the space gate had already closed, but Xiaohua's only thought was to quickly avoid the strange insect and not face it head-on. Xiaohua's thoughts were very simple, and his wish was also very pitiful. But it was this tiny wish that the heavens disdained to fulfill for him. The strange insect had been chasing after Xiaohua all along, and was gradually shortening the distance between them. Fortunately, when the strange insect was not too far away from Xiaohua, in Xiaohua's transcendence vision, he finally saw the end of the collapsed space passage, and in front of him was the intermittent brilliance of the void passage. Obviously, these void passages were also affected by the storm just now, but they had not completely collapsed. Good. Xiaohua was almost ecstatic from his heart. Previously, the boundless void was simply unable to avoid the strange insect. But now that there was a space passage, even if it was incomplete, Xiaohua would still be able to deal with the strange insect, right? Xiaohua cheerfully raised his head and let out a long whistle. As a newly emerged nascent soul grandmaster, he was actually forced to flee in a sorry state by a 2-foot-long strange insect. Xiaohua's heart was really sullen. Unfortunately, the void was still the void. Xiaohua's whistle not only couldn't be heard by himself, but also attracted the strange insect's attention. The strange insect that had been spreading its wings all this time kicked its 2 hind legs and disappeared. Damn it! Xiaohua shrunk his neck. How could he dare to be arrogant again? He looked left and right, then hurriedly turned around and flew towards a fork in the passage. Xiaohua had just flown close to the fork when a strange insect appeared at the place where Xiaohua was previously. Its mouth was full of fangs, flashing with a gray brutality. Not only did the strange insect appear, it also flew forward for a distance. Obviously, it thought that Xiaohua was the same as before and didn't change direction. Seeing this, Xiaohua hurriedly chose a passage and rushed in. At the same time, he waved his hand and the sword gourd appeared in his hand. Xiaohua's figure entered the passage. Then he immediately hid at the entrance of the passage and quietly stood there. The strange insect flapped its wings and calmly chased after Xiaohua. Without hesitation, it rushed into the passage that Xiaohua chose. As soon as the strange insect rushed in, it saw a pale white brilliance appear in the pitch-black void. This brilliance had a blurry appearance. Then, from this brilliance, a red and a green brilliance rushed out. The brilliance made a turn in the void and fell between the strange insect's neck. Chapter 3386. Damn it, go to hell. Xiaohua activated the sword gourd and sneered in his heart. He still knew the power of the execution spirit Yuan light. However, everything that followed made him unable to laugh, because before the red and green execution spirit Yuan light flew out, the strange insect did not stand still under the sword gourd. Instead, its 2 fist-sized black eyes flashed with a black light. The The sword gourd's effect of nailing the mind did not take effect. Xiaohua's heart thumped. He looked at the strange insect again. Seeing the execution spirit yuan light falling, it actually raised its head, opened its mouth, and bit towards the two execution spirit yuan light. Damn it wants to eat this. Xiaohua was shocked. He pointed his finger, and the green and red execution spirit yuan light fell into the mouth of the strange insect. The moment it fell, it slightly turned and cut on the strange insect's body. Ka-ka! Sparks appeared on the strange insect's body, and the two execution spirit yuan light flew back. The strange insect seemed to be angered by the execution spirit yuan light. It spread its wings, bared its fangs, and pounced on Xiaohua. The void was pitch black, and the strange insect was also pitch black. Even the gray on the wings could not be seen clearly in this void. If Xiaohua was not struggling to open his eyes at this time, how could he see the strange insect's attack? Moreover, the strange insect's wings did not seem to be abnormal. Not only was there no sound of wind, but there were also no ordinary fluctuations. It was as if the strange insect was one with the void. Seeing that the strange insect was more flexible than the fish in the water and approached in a few breaths, Xiaohua was shocked again. He did not have time to withdraw the sword gourd, and his other hand was about to take out the wishful rod. But just as Xiaohua's mind thought of the wishful rod, he saw a faint flash of darkness on his left foot, and then a desolate feeling came from his left ankle. Xiaohua's heart sank, and he thought this is not good, because his eyes had been staring at the strange insect. It was to prevent the strange insect's sneak attack. But at this time, in his eyes, he only saw the strange insect pouncing and did not see any other attacks. In other words, the strange insect actually had a sneak attack that could avoid his eyes. Thinking of this, Xiaohua did not have time to look for the wishful wand. He casually took out a worn-out magic tool from the space and threw it into the void based on his feeling. His body hurriedly curled up. Swoosh! Xiaohua watched as the blue-green magic treasure was shattered by an invisible thing in the air. Then, that invisible thing swept past Xiaohua's feet. An extremely cold chill came from Xiaohua's feet and went straight to the bottom of his heart. Hind leg. Xiaohua couldn't see it clearly, but he could see it with his naked eye. It was one of the two hind legs that the strange insect had used to hide in the void. Damn it, this strange insect is too powerful. Xiaohua's back was covered in a layer of cold sweat. Not only can the two hind legs fly, they can also be used as weapons. What's more, the hind legs can actually hide from the Dharma eye. Ouch! Just as Xiaohua dodged the sneak attack from the strange insect's hind legs, the two tentacles in front of the strange insect's head were even more nimble than two soft whips, and swept toward Xiaohua. The fist-sized eyes were like protruding black jade, flashing a bright light. It bared its teeth and bit towards Xiaohua's head. The strange insect's sneak attack and this attack were very ingenious. If Xiaohua didn't know ethereal steps and other martial arts, he would definitely be able to dodge the sneak attack. Xiaohua's body twisted strangely, dodging the tentacles. Unconsciously, his heart was filled with killing intent. Taking advantage of this gap, he put away the sword gourd and took out the wishful wand. After a few chong sounds, he raised the wishful wand and shouted, "Eat this Xiao staff." While speaking, the wishful wand took advantage of the strange insect's momentum and smashed towards the strange insect's head. The strange insect seemed to know the power of the wishful wand. Without waiting for the wishful wand to reach a few feet in front of it, the two strong hind legs kicked and its whole body suddenly disappeared. Even with Xiaohua's Dharma eye, he couldn't see where it went. Xiaohua had a bitter taste in his mouth. This kind of tactic was also his usual specialty. He didn't expect that a strange insect would use it to deal with him today. Well, then I'll let you know what this Zhao's means are. Xiaohua grinned, and a faint golden light flashed around his body. A Dharma body was quickly born from his body. Even in the void, the golden light illuminated the surrounding dozens of feet. When the Dharma body grew about 10 feet high, the wishful wand in Xiaohua's hand also turned into a size of 10 feet. At this time, Just at the edge of the golden light, the strange insect just happened to reveal its body. Fight! Xiao Hua didn't hesitate and wave his arms a few feet thick. The wishful wand made a silent sound. Before it fell, it had already imprisoned the space where the strange insect was. Pah! The strange insect seemed to have just come out of the magical power and had no spare strength to dodge. Without the slightest accident, the wishful wand smashed heavily on the back of the strange insect. Xiao Hua could even hear the sound of the strange insect being smashed out. "Grandma, this guy is too powerful." Xiao Hua finally breathed a sigh of relief and scolded. "This Xiao is a Yuanying stage master, but it was actually chased by a little guy like you. If people knew, how could this Xiao establish his Dao?" Before Xiao Hua could finish, the scene in front of him scared him again. He saw that the strange insect, which was a lot smaller than the wishful wand, had now been smashed into a pancake the size of a foot. However, this pancake flew out from under the wishful wand and then swelled up like a balloon. The two tentacles frantically slashed at the wishful wand. No mistake, right? This can't kill it? Xiao Hua felt a sense of powerlessness in his heart. In the moment when Xiao Hua was stunned, the strange insect's tentacles had already wrapped around the wishful wand. Xiao Hua only felt a burst of tremors in his hand and looked at the wishful wand again. There were a few scratches left on it. "Shrink!" Xiao Hua was distressed and hurriedly let the wishful wand shrink. While it was shrinking, he quickly pulled the wishful wand from the strange insect's tentacles and hurriedly put it into the space. When the wishful wand was put into the space, Xiao Hua's heart moved again. It was not easy for ordinary cultivators to put into the space, but this strange insect could, right? If it could be put into the space, wouldn't it be up to him to pinch, flatten, and file? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua tried to release his consciousness. Who would have thought that as soon as his consciousness touched the strange insect, he would immediately feel like it was being corroded? How could Xiao Hua still care about collecting the strange insect? He hurriedly withdrew his consciousness and turned around to escape. Xiao Hua was defeated. The strange insect wanted to take advantage of the victory to pursue and attack. However, the strange insect spread its two wings and rushed toward Xiao Hua. But this time it attacked Xiao Hua's Dharma body. Now, Xiao Hua's Dharma body was 10 feet tall, and his movements were not agile. How fast was the strange insect? In a flash, it had already pounced on the thick arm of Xiao Hua's Dharma body, and then it opened its saw-toothed mouth and began to bite. The Dharma body was actually damaged by the strange insect's bite. Good. Xiao Hua was a little panicked. He could not escape, and he could not fight. This locust-like strange insect also had a good appetite. Whether it was a magic tool or a Dharma body, it wanted to eat everything. What should he do? Xiao Hua did not doubt that even his own body and the nascent soul in his body would be food for this strange insect. It was no wonder that the nascent soul in his body was so scared. What should I do? What should I do? Xiao Hua was really at his wit's end. He anxiously thought of a way to defeat the enemy. At this time, the strange insect was on Xiao Hua's arm. Xiao Hua did not dare to put away his Dharma body. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, and with a wave of his other hand, the hand of a nascent soul appeared and grabbed the strange insect. Go to hell! Xiao Hua waved his hand, wanting to throw the strange insect far away. Unfortunately, the strange insect opened its mouth and swallowed the hand of the nascent soul. Xiao Hua could not even get rid of it. Xiao Hua had heard of a hero cutting his wrist, but he did not expect that there would be a day when he would be reduced to this kind of embarrassing situation. Fortunately, it was only the hand of the nascent soul. Xiao Hua shouted, "Go!" The nascent soul's hand broke into pieces. Xiao Hua didn't dare to use the lightning evasion technique. Instead, he used the Confucian cultivator's riding the clouds and riding the mist technique to hastily escape from the passage and plunge into the passage on the left. After experiencing this strange insect, the previous torrent and splendor became child's play. Xiao Hua was not afraid that there would be any more dangers in this passage. Xiao Hua even hoped that there would be some kind of danger in this passage that he could use to deal with the strange insect. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua was disappointed. Not only was this passage very safe, there was no danger at all. Even the strange insect quickly caught up and pounced on Xiao Hua with its teeth bared. Xiao Hua did not know whether to laugh or cry. This strange insect was like stepping on dog shit, staring at him. If he could not kill it, he was afraid that he would not be able to have peace in the future. Are you trying to test this father's means? Xiao Hua sneered and formed a seal with both hands, preparing to use the power of mountains of the Buddha seal catalog to kill the strange insect. However, the Buddha seal had just formed. Thinking that even the wishful staff could not kill this thing, what use could the power of mountains of the Buddha seal catalog have? Perhaps only the power of the stars and the power of karma that he had not yet comprehended would be useful, right? In addition to the Buddha seal, Xiao Hua also had the innate true water. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the innate true water fell out of the air and covered the strange insect. In his eyes, the blue light of the water was very dazzling, and the grayish-black color of the strange insect was completely hidden in the light of the water. I don't know if it will work this time. After experiencing the attack of the strange splendor, Xiao Hua did not dare to believe in the innate true water. He looked at the innate true water with some apprehension in his heart. Suddenly, Xiao Hua patted his forehead and said, "Damn it, this father doesn't care if it works or not. Don't I have to escape now? While this thing is trapped, this father can't escape, right?" While speaking, Xiao Hua's body flashed with lightning, and he rushed into the passage. He only flew out 100 feet, but the brilliance of the innate true water suddenly became dazzling, and even the void was illuminated. Then, the innate true water that trapped the strange insect began to freeze. Finally, in the silence, countless cracks appeared in the ice, and the strange insect broke out of the ice again. Its two hind legs kicked the void and disappeared. Chapter 33:87. Seeing the innate primordial water that had always been successful outside the void lose its effect again, Xiao Hua completely lost his fighting spirit. Although Yu Jing was extremely arrogant, there was no sound in the void after all. Moreover, Xiao Hua had just advanced to the yuanying stage, and the spiritual power in his body was abnormally abundant. In order to escape from the mouth of the strange insect, Xiao Hua completely abandoned the principle of keeping a low profile and fled in this void maze in panic. Xiao Hua was also unlucky. This strange insect was really powerful. Xiao Hua relied on his outstanding void perception and fainted several times in this void maze. But he still couldn't get rid of the strange insect. Even the small collapse of the void like the first time, Xiao Hua encountered several times. But every time Xiao Hua went directly from one passage to another, before he could calm down, the strange insect quietly appeared near him again. It was as if this strange insect could directly pass through the void. Moreover, this strange insect's perception also passed through the passage, and its magical power was far beyond Xiao Hua's. Of course, when Xiao Hua shook the strange insect was also not to be trifled with. Several times it actually saw through Xiao Hua's tricks and rushed in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua used the innate primordial water to maintain himself, and also used the blood drop paradise, samadhi true fire, and other magical powers. Not to mention that the samadhi true fire was eaten by the strange insect in one gulp, just the blood drop paradise alone. Before Xiao Hua could form the blood helmet, the strange insect's wings spread open and trembled rapidly. Xiao Hua originally thought that the strange insect was afraid, but who knew that the strange insect was even faster than before and almost rushed into Xiao Hua's mouth. It turned out that the strange insect was excited. Xiao Hua had no choice but to escape again. During the time he was escaping, Xiao Hua also understood that there was something on his body that attracted the strange insect. As for what it was, Xiao Hua was not sure, but Xiao Hua already had some understanding. If there was no accident, it should be the phenomenon of his yuanying stage that attracted the strange insect. Thinking about the strange insect swallowing the Dharma and swallowing the fluctuations, maybe it was the yuanying in his body that attracted it. Since he couldn't give up on the yuanying, he could only escape. The way he escaped was really dark. Xiao Hua's lofty aspirations of just advancing to the yuanying stage had already been trampled under the feet of the strange insect. Looking at the pitch-black and endless void in front of him, and then looking at the black, inhumane, strange insect behind him, Xiao Hua wanted to cry, but had no tears. I'm just advancing to the nascent soul stage. Why is the heavens playing such a joke on me? It was no wonder that Xiao Hua was sorrowful. When others advanced to the nascent soul realm, which one of them didn't enter seclusion for dozens of years. After carefully comprehending the heavenly Tao, one's Tao heart would be calm and one's Tao foundation would be stable. Once one's heart and mind merged with the heavens, one would be able to conceive a baby in one's golden core. When pregnant, who didn't hide far away and stay away from people. Some of them even went to the blessed enclave to look for their seniors to protect them. Xiao Hua, on the other hand, not only did he get a Jinan comparable to a nebula, he even got a hidden Jinan by accident. His divine sense couldn't even detect it. This was simply unprecedented. Even he himself didn't know how to conceive a baby. Now that they were in the void, the strange fluctuations actually carried traces of the heavenly Tao. What was special was that Xiao Hua's hidden pill could actually be seen in the void. This was also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Xiao Hua. Finally, after using more than 1,000 nascent gestation pills, he was able to conceive a baby. If he could conceive a baby smoothly, that would also be good. Xiao Hua once again encountered a strong void storm. It was unknown whether it was the void storm that made Xiao Hua successful or Xiao Hua's nascent gestation that pushed the void storm forward. In short, 100 years ago, Xiao Hua's nascent gestation pill brought disaster to the sword mound. The sword mound that took an unknown number of years to form was destroyed in an instant. Now, Xiao Hua's nascent gestation pill brought disaster to the spatial vein. An unknown number of spatial passages were also destroyed in an instant. Thinking about a cultivator like Xiao Hua, who brought disaster step by step, how could the heavenly Tao not favor him? The pitiful Xiao Hua was already powerless under the ravaging of the heavenly Tao. Without any scruples, he urged his imperial thunder to fly into any spatial passage he saw. When he saw any void collapse, he rushed in. That strange insect was even more arrogant. When it saw Xiao Hua's flickering lightning, it didn't have any pupils, only a pair of hard-shell eyes flashed with black light. It either spread its wings and chased after Xiao Hua like a pair of lovebirds under the heavenly Tao, or it kicked its legs and emerged from under Xiao Hua's feet. Every time it got close to Xiao Hua's side, it would stick out its fangs without any pity for the fairer sex. It couldn't wait to bite off a piece of Xiao Hua's flesh. Xiao Hua couldn't bear this kind of intimacy. He tried to think of ways to avoid it. Either he hit on the head with a wishful staff or poured cold water on it. But these methods couldn't extinguish the fire in the strange insect's heart. It even made the strange insect fly into a rage. After chasing for more than an hour, Xiao Hua didn't know where he had escaped to. He only knew that the Taoist robe he had just put on was already tattered like cotton. Seeing the strange insect shamelessly opening its sawtooth on his back, and those whip-like tentacles wanting to pull him into its arms, Xiao Hua suddenly lowered his body and dodged the strange insect's intimacy. Then, he desperately flew down. There was no direction in the void. At first, Xiao Hua was still flying down rapidly. After a while, he adjusted his body slightly and flew horizontally. At this time, the void was a bit strange. There was an inexplicable light in the darkness. These light rays could be seen with the naked eye. And where these light rays penetrated, there were some faint ripples like water ripples. Xiao Hua didn't know what these ripples were, but when he saw the abnormality in the void, he was secretly happy. This was because he knew that only the abnormality could give him a chance to escape. Xiao Hua's joy had just been born when the strange insect immediately exposed its head a few feet in front of his head. This ugly head instantly extinguished Xiao Hua's joy. At this point, Xiao Hua couldn't help but admire this strange insect. Its tracking ability was truly top-notch. This void was simply like its home. No matter where he fled to, it would always appear within a distance of less than 3 meters from him. Just as Xiao Hua was about to use the wishful staff, a few feet behind Xiao Hua, the place where the light rays had just appeared suddenly rippled with a layer of black ash. Xiao Hua was overjoyed when he saw this. He knew that another channel had collapsed. Almost without thinking, he came to a sudden stop and then flew backward, rushing into the grayish-black dot. When Xiao Hua flew into the black dot, which was just the size of a fist, had expanded to the size of a person. It was just enough for Xiao Hua to fly through. During this period of escape, Xiao Hua already knew that although this strange insect could use a magical ability that was close to teleportation, this method could not be used continuously. Generally speaking, the strange insect had to fly steadily for a while before it could continue to use its hind legs to teleport. This time, the strange insect had just teleported, so he was afraid that it could not immediately catch up. He had to use this opportunity to escape. In front of Xiao Hua's eyes was a mixture of gray and black. He knew that he was about to enter another channel. With a little light in this void channel, Xiao Hua proudly looked at the strange insect that was somewhat furious as it chased after him. Now, the collapse that Xiao Hua stretched out was temporary. The time it took to form was very short. Xiao Hua had calculated before that it could only allow him to pass through. Although the strange insect flew very fast, by the time it caught up, the collapse had already disappeared. Of course, if Xiao Hua was lucky and came to a more complicated void channel, he might be able to escape the strange insect's tracking. Xiao Hua's eyes darkened, and then it lit up again. It was just like when he used the transmission array on the Xiaoyu continent. Xiao Hua slightly frowned as he looked at the void channel that he had just entered. He could not help but feel a little strange. This channel was completely different from the previous one. It was like a place under the sky. Xiao Hua's surroundings were full of light. But where did this light come from? Xiao Hua could not find a reason for a while. Looking at the collapse that Xiao Hua had just passed through, as he had expected, it had already turned into a clear cloud that was gradually closing up. Damn it! Who cares where this is? Escaping with my life is more important. Xiao Hua was stunned, but he came to a realization. He cursed inwardly, and lightning flashed around his body as he prepared to fly in a certain direction. As soon as he activated the lightning escape technique, the familiar sound of lightning came from his body with a rumbling sound. "Io here!" Xiao Hua cried out in surprise, and hurriedly released his divine sense. Sure enough, there was actually not dense heaven-earth origin chi in this channel. Gurgle gurgle. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment, and the sound of boiling water came from above his head again. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over, and his expression changed greatly. Who else could it be? Naturally, it was the enemy that came out from the 2 tentacles. Go! Xiao Hua did not have time to look anymore. His whole body turned into a bolt of lightning, and he flew into the distance several times faster than the previous void. Who would have thought that just as Xiao Hua flew out for more than 1,000 feet, just 100 feet in front of his head, another silver brilliance flashed, and immediately the void began to rotate rapidly. In just a moment, a channel of several feet in size appeared out of thin air, and in this channel, another monster appeared. Xiao Hua was really surprised. His heart was shocked, but he calmed down again. He stretched out his hand, and the wishful staff was already in his hand. Now that he was in a desperate situation with a wolf in front and a tiger behind, he could only choose to fight. The monster quickly flew out of the channel and arrived in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed slightly, and with the help of the light in the space, he saw that the monster was several feet in size. Its whole body was gray, and the surface of its body was as smooth as oil. The light in the space shone on it and produced a reflection of light. There were no wings on the monster's back, only a dozen spike-like protrusions that stood straight on its spine. The monster's body was upright and slightly tilted, with two thick hind legs standing in midair and two thin and short forelegs slightly hugging the front of its chest. Whether it was the forelegs or the hind legs, in front of its four claws, the sharp points were emitting a green brilliance. Behind the monster, a thick tail like a lion's tail was fluffy, and where it swayed slightly, the gray mane was shining. Chapter 3388. The monster's head was not big, it was triangular, and its two eyes were also very small, as if it could not open them. In particular, the two eyes were far away from the top of its head, which seemed very uncoordinated. Although the monster's eyes were not big, what made Xiaohua puzzled was that when he was on guard, he could see the same surprise and shock in the monster's small eyes. The monster flew out of the passage and saw Xiaohua standing in front of it with the staff. Ayo! It let out a long roar, and its figure actually retreated, as if it was also avoiding Xiaohua. However, the monster had only retreated half a meter. Just as it was about to exit the tunnel, it seemed to have been stung by a scorpion. A layer of gray light flowed around its body, and its several-meter-long body suddenly turned into a sharp spike, charging towards Xiaohua. Xiaohua sneered and swept behind him with his divine sense. The strange insect had already stretched half of its body out of the void, so he raised the staff in his hand and shouted, "Evil creature, eat this Zhao's staff." Wu, the staff waved, stirring up the wind and clouds, and flew towards the monster with Xiaohua. But strangely, before he could make the wishful scepter bigger, the monster actually turned around and rushed towards the top of Xiaohua's head. This was really beyond Xiaohua's expectations. Although Xiaohua was puzzled, he was happy in his heart. The direction the monster was going was where the strange insect's head was, and in front of him was the passage left by the monster when it came in. If he flew into the passage and the strange insect was blocked by the monster, wouldn't he have a chance to live? After thinking about it, Xiaohua swung the wishful steel staff. Just like the monster, he urged the lightning escape to rush towards the passage. "Evil creature, where are you going?" Xiaohua had just flown half a foot when a loud voice came from the passage. Under the flash of golden light, another figure of several feet rushed out of the passage. Confucian Cultivator. The figure of several feet in size had not yet appeared, but the voice of the inscription with the ancient charm fell into Xiaohua's ears. Xiaohua was overjoyed. It was really a feeling of meeting an old friend in a foreign land. Immediately, a strong man wearing a golden armor and standing on a cloud rushed out of the passage with a three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand. The strong man was 4 feet tall, with a purple gold crown on his head and a fist-sized pearl inlaid on the golden crown. Under the golden crown was a big bronze face with thick eyebrows and big eyes, a lion's nose and tiger's mouth. It was very mighty. On the 40 feet tall body, a glittering golden chainmail was very eye-catching. In front of the chainmail's head was a heart-protecting mirror that was a few feet in size. It glowed with a faint golden light, which was the convergence of thousands of inscriptions on the armor. In the middle of the chainmail was a chain belt that was coiled around the waist. The entire chain belt was in the shape of a dragon. The dragon's body protected the burly man's waist, and the ferocious dragon's head floated above the waist. Where the light flowed, the dragon's head faintly opened its mouth and roared. The lower half of the chainmail was thousands of floating clouds, which were also formed by the inscriptions on the armor. When the burly man flew, these floating clouds also moved, and layers of golden light protected the lower half of the burly man's body. Looking at the man's hand, there was a three-pointed, double-edged blade that was also emitting a bronze luster. There was a trace of gray blood on the tip of the blade. If he was not mistaken, it was left behind by the monster that had just escaped. The strong man flew into the space and opened his huge eyes to look around. He immediately found something strange. A gaze swept over Xiaohua, and he called out strangely, "Thou art Buddhist sect fellow immortal?" Why are you in the space node? The strong man's tone was very contemptuous and even had a trace of hostility. His huge eyes faintly carried vigilance. Xiao Huan naturally knew that the strong man's target was the monster. It had nothing to do with him, so he did not say much. He casually waved his hand and flew toward the passage. You? The strong man slightly frowned, but his figure did not stop, as if he did not care about Xiao Hua. He moved his gaze away from Xiao Hua and looked at the distant monster and the strange insect that had just appeared. Ayo! At this time, the monster had already rushed between the strange insect and the strong man. It was roaring at the strange insect. The strange insect did not pay attention to it at first and flew toward Xiao Hua. Moreover, it waved its hind legs and wanted to teleport. But the monster continued to roar, and the 4-zhang tall strong man chased after it. Even the cold light on the 3-pointed double-edged sword attracted the strange insect's attention. Roar! Although the strange insect was small, its roar was very loud, not inferior to the monster's. After a few roars, the strange insect gave up on Xiao Hua. With a stomp of its legs, its entire body disappeared. The monster suddenly turned around. Its body, which was several zhang long, seemed to have no bones. It was even more ferocious than the dark clouds covering the sky as it pounced toward the burly man. The strong man looked at the disappearance of the strange insect with a strange expression. Then he used his huge eyes to sweep over Xiao Hua, who was rushing toward the passage that was about to be sealed. He naturally understood the cause and effect of this. Seeing that the monster had unexpectedly counterattacked, the 3-pointed double-edged sword in his hand danced, and he also paid attention to the traces of the strange insect. At this moment, there was no one who understood the strange insect's trick more than Xiao Hua. He had been paying attention to the strange insect all along. Now, seeing that the strange insect had actually abandoned him and surrounded the strong man with the monster, Xiao Hua's heart trembled. Xiao Hua was not clear about the strength of the strong man. However, the strength of the huge eyes technique was not inferior to his own divine sense. This meant that the strong man was at least a 5th-level essence energy martial grandmaster. Of course, Xiao Hua also hoped that the strong man had the power to subdue dragons and tigers and kill the strange insect and the monster one by one, so that he could escape. However, since the strange insect could abandon him to help the monster attack the human race, why would he abandon his own clansmen and only care about escaping? Thinking about what old monster Ji Feng and Ao Shui said, the spirit of all living things was the demon race, Xiao Hua's heart felt very uncomfortable. If he took advantage of the chaos to escape and built his life on the sacrifice of others, even if the strong man was a Confucian cultivator, Xiao Hua would definitely not agree. Would that kind of Xiao Hua still be Xiao Hua? Without hesitation, Xiao Hua immediately stopped flying and used the wind escape technique to fly towards the strong man. As he flew, he hurriedly transmitted his voice, "Fellow immortal, be careful about 4 feet below you." And the strong man stared blankly, clearly not expecting Xiao Hua to turn around. He actually glanced at Xiao Hua with some surprise. Seeing the strong man look at him, Xiao Hua's heart thumped, knowing that the situation was bad. Clearly, although the strong man was vigilant, in his heart, he did not take the strange insect seriously. Xiao Hua made a prompt decision and formed a hand seal with both hands. Rumble. The lightning attraction technique was displayed. Although the dark clouds didn't appear in the space, layers of lightning still appeared above the burly man's head and poured down like a waterfall towards the burly man's feet. The strong man was naturally shocked and raised his head in disbelief. At the same time, he raised the 3-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand, as if guarding against Xiao Hua's sneak attack. At the same time the strong man raised his head, 2 tentacles stretched out from the place where the lightning fell. As soon as the tentacles touched the lightning, they immediately trembled, then hastily retracted and disappeared. The strong man sucked in a breath of cold air. He really did not expect that in just the blink of an eye, the strange insect would actually catch up to him. If it were not for Xiao Hua's warning and Xiao Hua's lightning manipulation technique, he feared that he would have suffered a big loss. Moreover, the strong man also clearly saw that although Xiao Hua's lightning manipulation technique was powerful, when it hit the strange insect's tentacles, the tentacles only trembled for a moment and immediately retracted. In other words, the strange insect was not afraid of the lightning strike that even he was afraid of. If the tentacles really succeeded in sneak attacking him, what would his end be? The strong man shuddered, looking at the strange insect that attacked the strong man from the other side. When the lightning was produced, it also stopped abruptly. Its upright body also flickered with a gray brilliance, as if it was covered in a layer of oily light. Dozens of lightning bolts fell, but they did not stop on the strange insect's skin and directly slid down, not harming a single hair on the strange insect. Roar! The first wave of lightning poured down, but before Xiao Hua could activate the lightning manipulation technique a second time, a deafening sound resounded in the entire space. Xiao Hua frowned and felt a wave of dizziness in his mind. He immediately activated God's traction and blocked this unexpected sound attack. The strong man was also caught unprepared. His 40 feet long bronze-colored body slightly swayed, and then, without waiting for Xiao Hua's warning, the three-pointed, double-edged sword drew a cold light in the air and suddenly stabbed into the air. Kong! With a muffled sound, a ripple appeared in the air, and the strange insect's figure was revealed. The three-pointed, double-edged sword pierced the back of the strange insect. The strange insect tried its best to twist, but for a while it could not break free. Hiss! Seeing this, Xiao Hua could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. His eyes were drooling as he looked at the majestic weapon. Fellow immortal, be careful of the weapon. Suddenly, Xiao Hua thought of something and hurriedly reminded. Unfortunately, just as Xiao Hua's words were shouted, the strange insect's hind legs suddenly crossed in midair and cut on the back of the three-pointed, double-edged sword. Zalala! After a disgusting sound that made people's skin crawl, the strange insect took advantage of the momentum to escape from the tip of the sword and left a shallow mark on the sword. Damn it! The strong man roared. Apparently, he was also extremely distressed. He urged the clouds to dance and stabbed the strange insect again. Seeing that the strong man was concentrating on dealing with the strange insect and ignoring the restless monster, Xiao Hua did not know what the strong man was thinking. He opened his hand and took the wishful staff in his hand and shouted, "Grow, grow, 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 grow." As the wishful staff grew longer, Xiao Hua's heavenly law embodiment technique and Vajradharma body were also displayed. A Buddhist Vajra with a height of 5 feet and a diameter of a bowl appeared in the air. Woo! The tip of the wishful staff made a whimpering sound, and the area where the monster was located was shrouded by the wind of the staff. When the monster saw this, instead of retreating, it moved forward. With a kick of its hind legs, its whole body turned into a gray color and rushed toward the wishful staff. Chapter 3389. Granny, how did these monsters become spirits? They are even more cunning than the human race. Xiao Hua secretly cursed in his heart. The monster was so direct that his wishful steel rod did not completely fall down. The weight of the wishful steel rod was much lighter than when it fell down. The monster's action was to seize a slight opportunity. With a muffled sound, the wishful steel staff hit the back of the monster, which was also sent by the monster. Xiao Hua's arms trembled, and then he saw the monster's oily body flash. His wishful steel staff once again slipped from the monster's skin. Moreover, Xiao Hua could clearly see that when the wishful steel staff slipped, the muscles under the monster's oily skin were trembling rapidly. It was not so much fear, but more like it was unloading the force. Immortal friend, the strong man's very majestic voice came. This beast is called Penetrating Void. Not only can it walk freely in the void, but the surface of its body is also covered with a strange oil. This oil is slippery and is what this beast relies on to walk in the void. If it were not for the weapon that can tear the void, I am afraid it would not be easy to deal with. Granny, I'll let you hide. I'll let you hide. Xiao Hua listened to the strong man's reminder and then looked at the strong man who was fighting with the strange insect. He was far less embarrassed than himself. The Vajra Dharmakaya of the size of 5 feet madly swung the wishful steel staff in the air, displaying the Tong Tian staff technique. The staff was faster than the previous one, and the staff chased after the monster to hit it. At first, the monster was still able to resist. Like a lump of oily dough, it allowed Xiao Hua to beat it. But after a long time, Xiao Hua's strength did not seem to be exhausted. At first, the monster was obviously unable to endure. Seeing Xiao Hua's staff strike again, the monster dodged and disappeared. Pooh! The sound was much louder than before. Immediately after, the monster let out a miserable cry and looked towards the direction of the strange insect. Roar! At the same time, the strange insect was afraid of the strong man's weapon. It hid in the void several times to sneak attack the strong man, but it was hit by the strong man's 3-pointed double-edged sword. It was a little anxious. Now that it heard the monster's screams, it became even more furious. With a loud roar, its 2 hind legs crossed in the air at the same time, like 2 long swords slashing at the strong man's body. Ha ha! A mere bug dares to be arrogant in front of this true lord. The burly man laughed and waved the 3-pointed, double-edged sword in the air. Then he stretched out his left hand. Buzz! The entire space vibrated and countless clouds appeared out of thin air. Then the burly man clenched his left hand into a fist and punched at the 2 hind legs of the strange insect. Following the burly man's fist, the countless clouds that had just appeared turned into thousands of noble chi, sweeping up hurricanes, forming a vast chi pillar that attacked the strange insect from all directions. Shit! Xiao Hua was shocked again. He couldn't be bothered to kill the monster and hurriedly sent a voice transmission. Fellow immortal, be careful. This bug can devour the essence energy of heaven and earth. The brawny man was shocked and hurriedly tried to withdraw his fist. But how could he stop now? Rumble. Hundreds of chi pillars comparable to Xiao Hua's thunder-attracting technique descended from the sky and blasted towards the strange insect. The body of the strange insect rolled continuously under this intense bombardment. Oomph! Seeing the strange insect like this, the brawny man coldly snorted, looking rather obstinate and self-opinionated. However, after a moment, although the strange insect was still rolling within the chi pillars and looked extremely distressed, its originally 2 feet long shell actually slowly expanded until it was 4 or 5 feet long. Xiao Hua's mouth was somewhat bitter. This strange insect was really cunning. When it was fighting with the brawny man, it didn't reveal the slightest ability to devour the essence energy of heaven and earth. It had been hiding until now. The brawny man's move was indeed powerful, but it had also fed the strange insect until it was full. Humans are still inferior to insects. When did the world become so strange? Xiao Hua sighed and thought with emotion. If this Xiao didn't have some misgivings about this Confucian cultivator, I'm afraid I would have already told him about the abilities of this strange insect. Why would I have let this Confucian cultivator enter the trap? And if this Confucian cultivator had told this Xiao everything about this strange insect, I'm afraid this Xiao wouldn't have to waste so much effort, right? Fellow immortal, thinking of this, Xiao Hua hurriedly sent a sound transmission. Don't worry, first stall this insect. Wait until I kill this beast, then we'll work together to kill this insect. The brawny man looked up and down at Xiao Hua's Dharma body, which was even larger than his own, and a trace of a sneer appeared on his face. Why don't you deal with this insect and let me kill this monster? It seems like this strange insect was originally chasing you to kill you, right? Fellow immortal, Xiao Hua didn't hide anything and hurriedly explained, my methods mostly use the essence energy of heaven and earth. The weapon in my hand can't cause the strange insect to have any misgivings, so I can't stall this strange insect as easily as fellow immortal. This monster should be fellow immortal's target, right? Fellow immortal can rest assured. Even if I kill this beast, it will belong to fellow immortal. I don't want a single strand of hair. Xiao Hua said very sincerely, but the brawny man was still somewhat hesitant. When did your Buddhist sect use the essence energy of heaven and earth? Xiao Hua suddenly understood. He touched his bald head and said with a smile, I am Dao sect Xiao Hua, not a Buddhist sect's disciple. It's just that I encountered danger in the void passage, so the hair on my head no longer exists. Dao sect? The brawny man was slightly stunned. Soon after, a trace of understanding appeared in his eyes. He nodded and said, so what you used just now was Dao sect's lightning attracting technique. Be careful. At this moment, the strange insect had already stopped rolling in the righteous chi. Its body, which was close to 10 feet long, streaked across the sky like a gray shadow and once again flew towards the brawny man. I am Confucian cultivator's son Jian. That brawny man already knew how powerful the strange insect was. How could he still dare to be negligent? His two hands brandished the three-pointed, double-edged blade, blocking the strange insect. He also hurriedly said, not only does the penetrating void beast's skin and flesh have a rare toughness that is hard to break, its eyes even have the penetrating void eye, which can break open the void. If the penetrating void beast attacks with this, it will be even more powerful. If not for the penetrating void divine weapon, any defense would be unable to withstand a single blow. Fortunately, this beast has already used the penetrating void eye just now. It will need some time before it can use it again. You can try your best to find a way to kill this beast during this time. Although the brawny man spoke somewhat vaguely, Xiao Hua had already understood that this Confucian cultivator son Jian had indeed utterly defeated the penetrating void beast by relying on the three-pointed, double-edged blade in his hand. He didn't have such a divine weapon, so he probably had to think of another way. If it was a method to kill this beast, the first thing Xiao Hua thought of was the soul execution origin light. That strange insect was very peculiar. It seemed to have no soul and was unable to have its mind pinned down by the soul execution origin light. This penetrating void beast might not be the same. As long as it was pinned down by the soul execution origin light, even if the penetrating void beast's skin and flesh were strange, it would probably still be killed by the soul execution origin light. But the problem was that the soul execution origin light was Xiao Hua's killer. Xiao Hua didn't want to reveal it to outsiders. Moreover, the soul execution origin light's sharpness seemed to be insufficient to break open the void. Xiao Hua also didn't have the confidence to truly kill the penetrating void beast. Thinking of sharpness, Xiao Hua naturally thought of the sword light in his middle dantian. The 9 flying swords transformed from sword chi should be the sharpest weapon in Xiao Hua's hands right now. But obviously, these 9 swords weren't divine weapons. Even if they were used, they wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. Moreover, his Confucian cultivator's cultivation was really too shallow. There was no need to make a fool of himself in front of this 5th-level essence, energy, great grandmaster. Forget it. Xiao Hua's mind spun a few thoughts. The wishful staff in his hand once again made that beast stagger a few times. Xiao Hua made a decision. Or should I use the sword gourd? Let's kill this beast first. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua flung his hand and used the Yuanying's hand. He prepared to seal the penetrating void beast's surroundings in preparation for the sword gourd. Who would have thought that just as the Yuanying's hand was used, the penetrating void beast's body immediately flashed with a faint gray brilliance. A kind of slippery feeling transmitted from the Yuanying's hand. The space around the penetrating void beast seemed to have been sealed. But in this space, the penetrating void beast was still twisting like a loach. So much so that the top of the penetrating void beast's head flashed with a black and white light. An inch-long sharp spike suddenly emerged. An ice-cold feeling that was even more painful than the sharp spike transmitted from Xiao Hua's Niwen Palace. Powerful, Xiao Hua sensed that the innate divine restriction outside his Niwen Palace was suffused with a golden light. He knew that this penetrating void beast actually had an attack similar to a soul spike. He couldn't help but look at this penetrating void beast in a new light. Previously, when he saw this monster being chased into a sorry state by Sun Jian, and when he didn't see how powerful it was after fighting with it for so long, he had already felt contempt for it. Now, it seemed that a monster that could break through the void was definitely not as simple as he thought. Although this spike only hit the Yuanying's hand, it could still pierce into the Niwen Palace through the Yuanying's divine sense. It was not inferior to his own soul spike. If it was an ordinary cultivator, they would have been injured. It would be normal even if they died. It is impolite to come and go. Xiao Hua sneered and immediately used the soul spike technique. This soul spike technique was originally very powerful with the help of the sun shrouding art. Now that Xiao Hua had just advanced to the Yuanying realm, although his realm was not stable, the pressure and divine sense of the Yuanying realm had risen. We used it. Even gods and ghosts would be unable to escape. The spike that had just grown out of the penetrating void beast flashed with a strong black and white light and rapidly shrank. Its small head shook like a rattle drum. The unstable space within a few dozen feet of the penetrating void beast also shook violently. Layers of ripples gradually formed in the void. Buzz buzz. Just when Xiao Hua was confident in his victory and pondered about what method he should use to kill this void-penetrating beast, there was a sound that sounded like a group of mountains flapping their wings. Not only did the spatial fluctuation caused by the void-penetrating beast stop spreading in all directions, it instead suddenly contracted. In a few breaths, it seeped into the void-penetrating beast's body like flowing water. At the same time, the sharp spike that had just retracted suddenly extended out from the top of the void-penetrating beast's head, and an extremely brilliant black and white brilliance shot towards Xiao Hua's heart. Be careful, fellow immortal. This is the penetrating void eye. Sun Jian actually still had energy left and hurriedly warned. Chapter 3390. The black and white brilliance, known as the penetrating void, I was really fast. By the time Xiao Hua noticed it, it had already hit Xiao Hua's heart. Seeing that it was about to touch the clothes that Xiao Hua had taken out in a hurry, Xiao Hua was shocked. He hurriedly used the ethereal steps and the wind escape technique. An afterimage appeared in place, and Xiao Hua's figure barely dodged to the side. The black and white brilliance passed through Xiao Hua's afterimage and went straight into the void. Cold sweat broke out on Xiao Hua's head. He was secretly lucky to escape the attack. But immediately after, a sharp pain unexpectedly came from Xiao Hua's heart. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed and involuntarily cried out, How is this possible? I have clearly dodged it. Fly 10 feet higher. Sun Jian's stern reminder sounded in Xiao Hua's ears like a gong. Xiao Hua did not hesitate and flew into the sky. He flew not only 10 feet, but more than 50 feet. Just as he steadied himself in the air, a black and white beam of light as thick as a bowl shot out from the void behind his back. Xiao Hua hurriedly accelerated the operation of the blood drop paradise in his body to eliminate the danger of the penetrating void beast's attack. On the one hand, he was ready to take out the sword gourd. The defense of this void-penetrating beast was impeccable. His wishful steel staff could only injure it, but it was difficult to kill it in one blow. The attack of the void-penetrating beast was so strange. Not only could it attack the entity through the virtual shadow, but it could also turn back through the void. If he fought for a long time, although he might not die, he would definitely suffer. He had just formed his nascent soul, and his realm was not stable. If he was injured, it would definitely have a great impact on his Tao foundation. Thinking about it, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the sword gourd was about to attack. However, at this moment, something that shocked Xiao Hua happened once again. The void-penetrating beast was even more nimble than a swimming fish as it soared into the sky. The black and white brilliance that was as thick as the mouth of a bull accurately struck between its eyes. Pop! There was the sound of a bubble bursting. Although this sound was very soft, it caused the entire space to tremble slightly. After that, an eye the size of a bull suddenly opened between the void-penetrating beast's eyes as the black and white light hit it. His eyes were a mixture of grayish-white colors. Pieces of white were like white clouds floating in the grayish-white sky. Every piece of white cloud seemed to be the most precious thing in the world. Xiao Hua's gaze was instantly attracted. Xiao Hua's eyes were completely grayish-white. Hey, be careful, fellow Taoist. This is the second attack of the void-piercing eye. Just as Xiao Hua's gaze fell on the third eye of the void-penetrating beast, the soul cultivator Xiao Hua's sigh was like a sudden clap of thunder that woke Xiao Hua up. Void-penetrating eye? Void-penetrating beast. Xiao Hua came back to his senses at once as he suddenly realized something. The moment Xiao Hua turned his eyes, a silver-white brilliance shot out even more rapidly than the black-white brilliance. Even the space between Xiao Hua and the void-penetrating beast started to tremble intensely because of this silver-white brilliance. Dharma eye? Xiao Hua wasn't familiar with the black-white brilliance, but Xiao Hua was extremely familiar with this silver-white brilliance. Wasn't it just an ordinary delusion breaker Dharma eye and Goldie's third eye's silver light? Of course, the void-penetrating beast's silver light was clearly much more powerful than Xiao Hua's delusion breaker Dharma eye's silver light. Even if Xiao Hua had the time to open his Dharma eye, he might not necessarily be able to compete with the void-penetrating beast in terms of the power of the silver-white brilliance. Moreover, at this moment, that silver-white brilliance had already enveloped Xiao Hua. Even if Xiao Hua used the wind escape technique to dodge, it was unlikely that he would be able to escape unscathed. However, at such a critical moment, Xiao Hua was so calm that it was frightening. That deathly white face of his actually revealed a trace of a smile. He was simply more confident than someone who had a card up his sleeve. Xiao Hua didn't use any divine ability. He merely stretched out his left hand and held it flat in front of his chest. That silver-white brilliance that shook the space within a range of several zhang obediently fell into Xiao Hua's left palm like a chick returning to its nest. Seeing that the brilliance that filled the sky was annihilated by Xiao Hua's palm, Sun Jian's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. What's more, when that silver-white brilliance fell into Xiao Hua's palm, that void-penetrating beast seemed to have lost its essence. It softly collapsed in midair, unexpectedly without any power to resist. Immortal, fellow immortal. Sun Jian was flabbergasted. He didn't have time to think about what kind of divine ability Xiao Hua had used. He suddenly came to a realization. A kind of ecstasy rushed into his heart, and he shouted, "Quick! You quickly come and replace me." Xiao Hua understood that Sun Jian wanted him to deal with the strange insect while he came to kill the void-penetrating beast. Okay. Xiao Hua agreed, almost without hesitation. He waved the wishful staff in his hand and was about to fly over. However, before Sun Jian and Xiao Hua could exchange places, that strange insect let out a strange "oh," and its entire body swelled up again. With a kick of its hind legs, it actually wanted to rush to the void-penetrating beast in front of Sun Jian to save it. It's too late. Sun Jian instantly weighed the pros and cons and said anxiously, "Fellow immortal, take this beast first." Okay. Xiao Hua frowned. Seeing that the strange insect was about to teleport away, he hurriedly swept the void-penetrating beast with his mind. The behemoth of several zhang in size instantly fell into his space. Seeing that Xiao Hua was so decisive and took the void-penetrating beast so nimbly, Sun Jian couldn't help but have a trace of doubt in his heart. After all, this void-penetrating beast was his main purpose in entering the space node this time, and he had spent a lot of energy to enter this time. Now that the strange beast was defeated by him, but it was taken by a cultivator he didn't know. Moreover, it was a Taoist cultivator. Whether he could get it back and what price he had to pay to get it back had become a big problem. However, just as he had doubts, the strange insect finally showed its power. The strange insect's body suddenly spewed out a gray mist. This gray mist was extremely viscous. As soon as it fell into the void, part of it evaporated and disappeared, while the other part covered the strange insect's body. Fellow immortal, this strange insect. Sun Jian had a bad feeling in his heart. He hurriedly looked at Xiao Hua, expecting Xiao Hua to give a definite answer. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua had never seen the strange insect act like this. He was also shocked. He waved the wishful staff in his hand and shouted, "Fellow immortal son, this is the first time I have encountered this strange insect. I don't know its origin. Now you and I have to work together without any gaps. This void-penetrating beast is useless to this little one, as long as this strange insect. No, as long as you and I can escape with our lives, this little one can immediately give the void-penetrating beast to you." Escape? When Sun Jian heard this, his face unconsciously showed arrogance. He waved the three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand and said coldly, "How can I escape when dealing with an insect? Although we are inside the space node, if others know about it, where will my face go? You don't have to say more. We will work together to kill this strange insect." Space node? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned, and then he understood that this spatial node was probably another name for spatial veins. However, he still felt disdain towards Sun Jian's pride and face. "You're about to lose your life, so what face is there to talk about?" Unfortunately, Xiao Hua looked around and saw that the previous passage had been closed. Although the space was large, with his understanding of the strange insect, he was afraid that he would not be able to escape the pursuit of the strange insect. He could only fight the enemy together with Sun Jian. Xiao Hua had just flown to the other side of the strange insect when a sharp sound of wind filled the entire space. Behind the gray fog, the strange insect's body had doubled in size. It was already close to 3 zhang tall. Moreover, there were crescent-shaped grooves all over the strange insect's body. The sharp and ear-piercing sound of wind came from those grooves. Along with the sound of the wind, waves of heaven and earth yuan qi fell into the grooves. The strange insect's body gradually expanded again. As time passed, the suction force in the groove became stronger and stronger. Not only did the entire space shake, even Xiao Hua and Sun Wu's Dharmakayas, which were dozens of feet in size, could not stand still. Furthermore, an extremely unfamiliar aura, which was similar to pressure or primordial thought, was being emitted from the strange insect. Xiao Hua could feel his own divine thought, and even the Buddha Saraira could not help but jump out of his Naiwan palace and pounce towards that aura. Oh no, Xiao Hua had never encountered such a strange attack. The innate divine restriction in his Naiwan palace flashed with golden light and protected the Buddha Saraira with his divine sense. Looking at Sun Jian, there was also shock on his face. Golden light flashed around his body. Obviously, he was also resisting. Moo! The strange insect spread its wings and let out a moo like a cow. It was unknown whether the sound came from the mouth of the strange insect or from its wings. Similarly, 2 faintly discernible phantoms flew out from the strange insect's wings and pounced toward Xiao Hua and Sun Jian at the same time. Not waiting for the illusory figure to get close, a burst of indescribable coldness appeared around Xiao Hua. Wisps of ice were actually formed in the air, and layers of white frost instantly appeared on Xiao Hua's bald head. That coldness seemed to be able to freeze his bones. Xiao Hua, who had not known the cold for a long time, could not help but shiver. Looking at the strange insect's malevolent shadow pouncing towards him, Xiao Hua suddenly smiled coldly. That smile was even colder than the strange insect's shadow. This was because between Xiao Hua's eyebrows, a dark green light flashed. The 2 small characters, thunder and lightning, appeared out of thin air. Then, a wave of lightning enveloped the space between Xiao Hua and the strange insect. With a kacha sound, it landed on the strange insect's shadow. Moo! The strange insect's shadow was obviously caught unprepared. Even Xiao Hua's attack was beyond its expectations. With just a layer of lightning, more than half of the strange insect's shadow was eliminated. The strange insect's shadow no longer dared to move forward. For the first time, it panicked and fled in front of Xiao Hua. However, just as the strange insect retreated, Xiao Hua's second wave of lightning ruthlessly poured down. The originally incomplete shadow was instantly destroyed by Xiao Hua. Seeing that his attack had succeeded, Xiao Hua was immediately filled with courage. Previously, this strange insect was like a thorny hedgehog. Xiao Hua wanted to eat it, but he did not dare to open his mouth. Now that he finally had a breakthrough, it seemed that the soul cultivation technique was also effective against this strange insect. His lightning and thunder technique was enough to kill this strange insect. Chapter 3391. Looking at Sun Jian in the distance, he was somewhat different from Xiao Hua. Seeing the shadow of the strange insect pouncing over, he suddenly slashed with the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand, directly chopping at the shadow. What was really surprising was that the shadow actually split into two pieces at the tip of the three-pointed, double-edged sword. However, at the corner of Sun Jian's mouth, before that sneer could appear, the two pieces of a shadow turned into two different shadows and continued to pounce on Sun Jian's body without slowing down. Oomph! Sun Jian sneered again, not dodging at all. Golden light flowed around his body like a golden mountain. When the shadow pounced on the golden light, it let out a sizzling sound, and in a moment, more than half of it melted away. Illo! The strange insect finally let out a roar, and the shadow turned into a wind. Without waiting for Sun Jian to attack further, it rushed into the strange insect's body, and the suction force of the crescent moonlight groove increased again. Since you're so greedy, I'll let you eat to your heart's content. Sun Jian seemed to have thought of something, and with a raise of his hand, the noble qi turned into a pillar of qi and bombarded the strange insect. The huge roar even made Xiao Hua look askance. He really didn't expect that the punches and kicks of Confucian cultivators could reach such a level. Sun Jian, Xiao Hua suddenly woke up. The Confucian military school seems to have been founded by Sun Wu, Old Master Sun, right? According to Fu Jiwen, the Confucian scholars can command the wind and clouds, and the martial artists of the military school can also throw the wind and clouds into chaos with their punches and kicks. This Sun Jian might be a descendant of the military school. Seeing the huge wave of air rushing into the strange insect's body, the strange insect swelled up like a balloon. Its body grew bigger and bigger, and its saw-like tentacles and bloody mouth exuded a strange bloodthirsty aura. In particular, as the strange insect's body grew bigger, its terrifying aura also rapidly increased. According to Xiao Hua's estimation, in the time it took to eat a meal, this aura would definitely surpass his own pressure. Fellow immortal Xiao, Sun Jian urged the noble qi to pour into the strange insect's body, and said, "This insect is extremely powerful, and its defense is even stronger than the void-penetrating beast. Although my weapon can injure this insect, it can't completely kill it. Furthermore, I've already thought about it for a long time, and I don't think any of my abilities can completely restrain this insect. From what I can see, this insect is able to pass through the void like the void-penetrating beast, and it even has the ability to teleport. Even if we try to escape, I'm afraid we won't be able to. The only thing we can do now is to fight it to the death." That's exactly what I was thinking. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. However, it seems that fellow immortal Sun wants to use his noble qi to make the strange insect explode, right? This road doesn't seem to be accessible. It's impossible for the noble spirit to make the insect explode, but if the noble spirit were to explode inside the insect's body, would I be able to help it from the outside? Sun Jian seemed to have a bamboo shoot in his chest. He said with a smile, but the smile on his bronze face looked a little strange. I understand. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. He didn't know what method Sun Jian had to make the massive amount of righteous qi explode in the strange insect's body, but Sun Jian's idea was indeed the only way. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and reminded, "What if I also gather some heaven-earth yuan qi for it?" "Do as you wish." Sun Jian smiled faintly. "Perhaps it's better than nothing?" "All right," Xiao Hua also smiled. He rubbed his hands together, and countless rays of light appeared in his palms. When Xiao Hua waved his hands, bursts of heavenly thunder poured into the space like a torrential downpour. They were even denser than hail as they smashed into the strange insect. "Oh!" Sun Jian raised his eyebrows. He was clearly a little surprised. Although Xiao Hua's lightning thunder technique was strange, its power and momentum were really small, so Sun Jian didn't pay attention to it at all. However, this lightning attraction technique actually shook the entire space. It was no wonder Sun Jian had a whole new level of respect for it. However, Sun Jian clearly had some foundation. He only raised his eyebrows, and the surprise only lasted for a moment before he focused on urging the noble spirit. In fact, it wasn't just Sun Jian who was surprised. Even Xiao Hua himself was greatly surprised. Before he reached nascent soul, Xiao Hua still had to form hand seals, and the male and female lightning beast cores in his body also had to respond. Now, he didn't need to form any seals at all. It was as if the lightning in the sky was his, and he could take it down with a wave of his hand. Could it be that my nascent soul stage is different? The male and female lightning beast cores have already fused with my nascent soul. My nascent soul is already able to completely sense lightning. Xiao Hua secretly pondered. He knew that a cultivator's nascent soul could directly communicate with the world and use the origin energy of the world. However, there was a limit to this communication. It also had to rely on the cultivation of the nascent soul to gradually obtain it. How could it be like him, who had just reached the nascent soul stage and could freely control lightning? At this moment, he looked at his dantian and saw that the tiny nascent soul that was exactly the same as him was no longer fearful. It gritted its teeth and waved its tiny hands and feet like him, wishing it could pull down the thundercloud from the 9 heavens and smash the strange insect that had scared him to death in an instant. "Oh!" Feeling the nascent soul's anger and hatred, Xiao Hua suddenly understood. After a nascent soul cultivator reached the nascent soul stage, they would only have one nascent soul. After releasing the nascent soul would be placed in the nascent soul. Their own physical body would be in an awkward state where no one could control it. Of course, there were also some cultivators who had secret techniques that allowed them to control their physical body for a short period of time. It was just like when Taoist Jing Si was chasing him. Taoist Jing Si controlled her nascent soul to use a teleportation technique to attack him while also controlling her physical body to fly in the air. Other people didn't have a second nascent soul, but Xiao Hua himself had one. Not to mention a second nascent soul, even a third nascent soul, a fourth nascent soul, even a 10th nascent soul had one. Thinking about how the green-robed Xiao Hua was muttering that he didn't have a suitable body to leave the space. This nascent soul, wasn't it tailor-made for these nascent souls? If it was possible, wouldn't Xiao Hua's several nascent souls be able to use this nascent soul as a body and come out every day to be free and unfettered for a while? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua actually beamed with joy. Fellow Taoist Xiao, put in more effort. At this moment, although Sun Jian didn't know why Xiao Hua suddenly laughed, his heart was as calm as Xiao Hua's. He didn't forget to remind him as he looked at the strange insect that was expanding like a balloon. Hearing this, Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist son, rest assured. This Xiao doesn't have any other magical abilities, but this lightning attracting technique can fill me up. Let's see how this Xiao will raise this strange insect." As he said this, another wave of lightning easily descended. "Good." Sun Jian was overjoyed. He punched out, and the same dozens of qi pillars shot towards the strange insect. Countless waves of qi rolled around the strange insect's body, and countless lightning crackled. Bursts of gray light flickered, as if it was about to lose control of the light. Therefore, Sun Jian touched his chest and transmitted his voice, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, looking at the strange insect situation, I'm afraid it's about time. This one will trigger the righteous qi inside the strange insect's body. If your excellency has any method to detonate the lightning, that would be the best." Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. He understood in his heart that the current him might be able to detonate the lightning, but the lightning that was still absorbed by the strange insect's body was probably no longer lightning. How could he still control it? If there's still some fire talismans in the space, I can give it a try. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's heart suddenly moved. He opened his mouth and spat out a wisp of spiritual fire, along with Xiao Hua's divine fire art. The spiritual fire rushed into the void like a lively little bird and followed the lightning towards the strange insect. Xiao Hua was most likely the most familiar with this kind of sneaky person who hid the spiritual fire. However, just as Xiao Hua released the spiritual fire, a misty green light flashed in front of his eyes. It was precisely from Sun Jian's hand. Kunlun. Kunlun mirror? Xiao Hua looked at the familiar light, and shock appeared in his eyes. He almost blurted out, "That's right, Sun Jian's hand was holding a treasured mirror." It was the Kunlun mirror that Xiao Hua was familiar with. It was almost the same as the icy mirror in Xiao Hua's space. Ow! How could there be another Kunlun mirror? Xiao Hua's heart was somewhat crazy. His own icy mirror was still incomplete. He didn't expect that a complete Kunlun mirror had already appeared in this unfamiliar hidden immortal continent. He saw Sun Jian holding the Kunlun mirror in his hand, and his hand formed a seemingly right but actually wrong seal. Several streams of righteous qi rushed into the Kunlun mirror, and the Kunlun mirror was suffused with a faint clear light. Then, that clear light, under Sun Jian's control, turned into a beam of light and rushed towards the strange insect. The beam of light was very strange. After rushing out of the Kunlun mirror for more than half a foot, it immediately disappeared. Looking at Sun Jian again, he threw the Kunlun mirror in his hand into the air and raised the three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand high into the sky. A burst of ka-ka-kong sounds came from his body, and the size of his Dharma body increased by more than 10 feet. Moreover, the golden light around his body became even brighter. Kill! Sun Jian stepped on the auspicious cloud and rushed towards the strange insect with the three-pointed double-edged sword. Buzz! The strange insect flapped its wings, and countless light shadows rushed out of the strange insect's body, wanting to block Sun Jian. However, those light shadows turned into fireflies under the three-pointed double-edged sword. Ayo! The strange insect roared and flew towards the three-pointed double-edged sword. One of its hind legs drew a line in the air, blocking the three-pointed double-edged sword. Unexpectedly, it made a golden sound. Sun Jian seemed to be defeated. His figure staggered, and the strange insect's sawtooth mouth took advantage of the situation to bite one of Sun Jian's arms. Not good. Xiao Hua was shocked when he saw this. With a wave of his hands, he raised a wishful staff and smashed it towards the back of the strange insect. Kill! Sun Jian's voice was like spring thunder, and the golden light on his left arm flashed. The strange insect's sawtooth mouth couldn't bite him, and Sun Jian took advantage of the situation to swing his right hand, and the three-pointed double-edged sword was inserted into the back of the strange insect. Shwa! The three-pointed double-edged sword flashed with golden light, and a deep crack immediately appeared on the back of the strange insect. At the same time, a ray of clear light burst out from the strange insect's body, and the strange insect's body expanded rapidly. Chapter 33:92. Pong! With a loud bang, Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff also arrived and smashed a large part of the strange insect's back. However, the gray mist that had previously covered the strange insect's body was now rising again. The strange insect's body fluctuated rapidly in the mist, sometimes big and sometimes small. As the strange insect's mist rapidly retreated into its body, the clear light was gradually obscured, and the scars of the three-pointed, double-edged sword slowly disappeared. When Sun Jian saw this, his eyes flashed with extreme panic. No one knew the power of the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand, and no one knew the power of the Kunlun mirror. These two treasures together could not kill the strange insect. How many methods in the world could threaten this strange insect? Just as Sun Jian was panicking, Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed slightly, and the wishful steel staff in his hand quietly retracted. This was because he had already seen that the spirit fire that had just been sent into the air was sucked into the crescent-shaped groove by the strange insect, along with a few strands of lightning. Fellow immortal Xiao. Sun Jian's voice sounded in Xiao Hua's ear, and his tone was very bitter. This Sun said too much. This strange insect is too powerful. I'm afraid it's an alien species. And I should make other plans. While this strange insect has not yet completely refined the noble qi in its body. Right when Sun Wu hung his head dejectedly and was about to discuss how to escape with Xiao Hua, a rumbling sound suddenly resounded from within the strange insect's body. The strange insect's body instantly expanded to a size of around 15 meters, and then the gray mist around it expanded even more before shrinking to a size of around 10 meters. But right after that, the strange insect's body expanded once more. Then there was no more. A spark was produced in the mouth of the strange insect, and the entire body of the strange insect was no longer under its control. It suddenly grew to the size of 100 feet. Pong! With a loud sound, the strange insect's body completely burst open, and countless flames rushed out of the strange insect's body. The power of the strange insect's explosion was not great, but the strange thing was that the entire space trembled at an extremely fast speed, and the four corners of the space flashed with a dark brilliance. The dark brilliance quickly dissipated, and the light of the entire space gradually dimmed. Go! Sun Jian roared first. This place is about to collapse. Fellow immortal Xiao, please follow this sun out. If you're not careful, you will be implicated by the collapse into the void. I'm afraid it will be difficult to return to the space node. All right. Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense, but he didn't find any strange insect's soul essence. Knowing that he had indeed killed this strange insect, he didn't hesitate to agree and flew up with Sun Jian. But just as Xiao Hua was about to fly up, a strange feeling suddenly emerged from his heart. Xiao Hua almost instantly shouted, "Fellow immortal Sun, be careful." Then his entire body abruptly flew backward. Even as he was flying, his entire waist was also rapidly leaning backwards. When Sun Jian saw Xiao Hua's sudden change, his complexion changed greatly. He thought that Xiao Hua wanted to take his void-penetrating beast and flee. Unconsciously, he swung the three-pointed, double-edged blade in his hand. Just as he was about to give chase, before Sun Jian's figure could fly, a loud sound rang out. A huge force came from the three-pointed, double-edged blade. Sun Jian's right arm went numb, and he almost couldn't hold the weapon in his hand. When he took a closer look, he found that one of the legs of the insect that had just exploded was stuck in his three-pointed, double-edged sword. Hiss! Sun Jian sucked in a breath of cold air. A feeling of surviving a disaster arose spontaneously. The appearance of this hind leg was so strange that he couldn't detect it at all. If it weren't for Xiao Hua's warning, he was afraid that he would have been stabbed by this hind leg. Even if he didn't die here, the injury he received would certainly be heavy. Thinking about his guess about Xiao Hua just now, Sun Jian's face unconsciously became slightly hot. At this moment, Xiao Hua also saw the result. The other hind leg of the strange insect also stretched out from the void and flew past Xiao Hua's lying chest. Xiao Hua's eyes were sharp and his hands were nimble. He raised his hand and used the heaven and earth sleeve technique to take this object into his space. Xiao Hua's figure didn't change, and his divine sense swept out once more. Meanwhile, Sun Jian opened his eyes and a faint golden brilliance flashed out from his eyes as he looked around. After looking around for an entire moment, Sun Jian called out, "I'm afraid it's fine. Fellow immortal Xiao, let's leave quickly." Sun Jian seemed to be very familiar with this place. He flew to a place in the space, looked around, and raised the Kunlun mirror in his hand. Another beam of light shot out from the mirror and shot into the space. Then, Sun Jian looked at the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand and put away the strange insect's hind leg. He looked at the broken weapon with some heartache. He raised his hand and drew in the air. A shallow crack appeared in front of him. Sun Jian stretched out his hand and grabbed one side of the crack. As if he was pulling, the crack actually opened up. Sun Jian lowered his head and drilled into the crack. Xiao Hua, who was watching from the side, was dumbfounded. Damn it, this Sun Jian can actually tear space apart with his hand? If Xiao Hua didn't see it with his own eyes, he wouldn't dare to believe it. What kind of divine ability was this? Of course, Sun Jian's move couldn't be denied as a show of force. Xiao Hua couldn't help but be vigilant. After passing through several similar spaces, Sun Jian and Xiao Hua arrived at a small space filled with clouds. Sun Jian entered the space and found a cloud to stand on. His golden eyes swept across the entire space. Slowly, the golden light around him dissipated, and his avatar returned to its original state. Xiao Hua also stood several meters away from Sun Jian. His body flickered with brilliance, and he also withdrew his heavenly laws embodiment technique. Fellow immortal Xiao, Sun Jian looked at Xiao Hua and said, "Where did this strange insect come from? Why is it so strange? Even if it was killed, how could it still attack us?" Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and cupped his hands. "Fellow immortal Sun, this Xiao thanks fellow immortal for your help. If I didn't meet fellow immortal Sun today, this Xiao wouldn't know whether the Xiao's luck would be good or bad." Sun Jian faintly glanced at Xiao Hua and said with a double meaning, "Unpredictable luck? That's not necessarily true. If fellow immortal Sun didn't intervene in the end, that strange insect might not have been killed." Xiao Hua knew that Sun Jian saw something strange, but he didn't point it out. He continued, "As for fellow immortal Sun's question about the origin of the strange insect, this Xiao isn't clear. It was just a chance encounter. And it seems like it really is an alien creature." Sun Jian nodded. "This insect doesn't seem to have any soul. It's already so powerful, but when it was attacked just now, I didn't see any soul essence appear. If it was something from the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm, I'm afraid it would have already used its soul essence to escape. That's right. This Xiao also examined it just now, and I didn't see any soul essence. Moreover, this Xiao has a magic treasure that's effective against souls, but it's ineffective against this insect." Xiao Hua also nodded. In addition, this insect is addicted to vital energy. It's not afraid of the Taoist's vital energy of heaven and earth, or the Confucian cultivator's vital energy. If fellow immortal Sun didn't use the method of fighting poison with poison, we really wouldn't have been able to kill it. Fortunately, there's only one of this kind of alien creature. If there were another half of it, this Sun would also have to flee." Sun Jian smiled in a relaxed manner. Thinking about the matter of face that Sun Jian mentioned just now, Xiao Hua also smiled. He stretched out his hand and said, "Fellow immortal Sun, do you have a Chinquan bag? I can return the void-penetrating beast to you." Sun Jian raised his eyebrows and was rather surprised. He was originally thinking about how to ask Xiao Hua and what price he should pay to get the void-penetrating beast back. He didn't expect that after a few words, Xiao Hua would directly ask to return it. "Many thanks, fellow immortal." Sun Jian naturally wouldn't be negligent. He touched his chest and took out a Chinquan bracelet and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua also took out a small Chinquan bag and pretended to put the void-penetrating beast into the Chinquan bracelet. He handed it to Sun Jian and said, "All right, it's returned to its owner." After receiving the Chinquan bracelet, Sun Jian scanned it with his vital sense. Sure enough, he saw that the void-penetrating beast was still inside without a single hair missing. Sun Jian almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. He hurriedly said, "Fellow immortal Shao, please wait a moment. After I take out the void-penetrating eye, I'll return the other things to you. This is what I promised earlier." "Haha, do as you wish." Xiao Hua chuckled. Actually, he was already muttering in his heart. "Even if you want to take the void-penetrating eye, why don't you first leave the spatial meridian and arrive at hidden immortal continent?" But after only a short moment, Sun Jian spoke with a difficult expression. "Fellow immortal Shao, I have no choice but to go back on my word once more." "Oh, why?" Xiao Hua was stunned and asked curiously. Sun Jian raised the Qinquan bracelet in his hand and explained. "Even though the void-penetrating eye on the void-penetrating beast is undamaged, the void-penetrating beast's vital essence has been completely exhausted. It's not suitable to take out the void-penetrating eye now. Only after the void-penetrating beast recovers its vital essence can the void-penetrating eye be taken out in perfect condition. So, I can't return the things I promised fellow immortal now. Otherwise, all of my painstaking efforts would be for naught." "Haha, so that's how it is." Xiao Hua thought in his heart and hurriedly waved his hand. "I understand. I'll give it to fellow immortal. I don't have the qualifications to make a fuss about it with fellow immortal." "That won't do." Unexpectedly, Sun Jian shook his head in all seriousness. "How could I be someone that goes back on my word? After I take out the void-penetrating eye, I will give the other parts to fellow immortal. However, fellow immortal will have to wait for a few more years." It's fine, it's fine." Xiao Hua had already obtained a lot from the Void Meridian, so he did not want to argue with Sun Jian anymore. He nodded and said, "When you and I return to the hidden immortal continent, fellow immortal will give me the address. I will go and find fellow immortal when I have time in the future. Fellow immortal should tell me the location of the cave." Sun Jian laughed. "I don't know when I can return this item to you." "Fine." Xiao Hua laughed. "If nothing unexpected happens, I will be the imperial advisor of Yu Province's Jiang country in the future. Fellow immortal will know if you ask around." "All right, I'll remember it." Sun Jian nodded, and then said embarrassedly, "In addition, there is no way out from the spatial node here to the hidden immortal continent." "Fellow immortal Shao, you can either return to the hidden immortal continent through the passage you came from, or go out nearby. However, when I was chasing after the void-penetrating beast, a large-scale void storm appeared in this spatial node, causing the entire node to be extremely unstable. If nothing unexpected happens, it won't be long before this place collapses and collapses, and this spatial node won't exist either. Therefore, if I were fellow immortal, I definitely wouldn't take the risk and would make plans after leaving." Chapter 3393. Ah, Xiao Hua was stunned. He was the one who added fuel to the fire in the void storm, so it was normal for the space node to be unstable. However, he didn't agree that it would immediately collapse. However, he still asked curiously, "Fellow immortal son, are you not going to return to the hidden immortal continent?" "Yes, I have other things to do, so I won't be returning for the time being," Sun Jian replied. Xiao Hua was in a difficult position. He smiled bitterly and said, "Then where's the nearest space node?" At this point, Xiao Hua suddenly understood. If it's not the hidden immortal continent, then it must be the Pure Land and the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. Since Sun Jian chased the void-penetrating beast to this place, if I'm not wrong, the nearest should be the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. The Pure Land world. Sun Jian's words killed Xiao Hua's guess. If fellow immortal is willing, I can send fellow immortal to the Pure Land world. However, I'm not sure where in the Pure Land world this place is. Huh? When Xiao Hua heard this, he almost laughed out loud. What was his biggest wish after arriving at the three continents? Wasn't it just going to the Pure Land world? Wasn't it just to wake Jiang lure up? Now he could actually arrive at the Pure Land world without using any heavenly steeds or crossing the ocean. What was there for Xiao Hua to be unhappy about? Xiao Hua suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and cupped his hands. If so, fellow immortal, please send me to the Pure Land world. Fellow immortal, you're Taoist disciple. You have to be careful in the Buddhist sect's territory. Sun Jian didn't say much. He activated the Kunlun mirror and brought Xiao Hua across several spaces. As they flew, he reminded, Buddhist sect's bald donkeys are people who don't mean what they say. Don't let them see through you. If I don't say it myself, how would they know that I'm a Taoist? Xiao Hua smiled and touched his bald head. Sun Jian smiled and nodded. That's true. If fellow immortal wasn't wearing a Taoist robe, I would really think that fellow immortal is a Buddhist sect's disciple. As he spoke, Sun Jian took out the Kunlun mirror. He waved the three-pointed, double-edged blade again, and a small gap appeared in the void. As the gap appeared, a biting cold wind blew in, followed by fresh air. Fellow immortal Xiao, please. Sun Jian put away his weapon and flew a few hundred feet away. He made way for the gap and cupped his hands with a smile. The green hills never change, and the green waters flow forever. Fellow immortal Sun, we'll meet again. Xiao Hua knew Sun Jian's intentions. He cupped his hands in salute and stepped out of the gap. Then, lightning flashed around his body as he flew into the distance. The gap high up in the sky gradually closed up. Sun Jian's eyes looked through the gap at the spot where Xiao Hua had disappeared. As he looked at the swirling snowflakes, a thoughtful expression flashed in his eyes. He muttered to himself, this Xiao Hua is a kind and righteous person. Previously, he did not flee by himself. Later on, he even helped me kill the strange insect. In the end, he even completely handed over the void-penetrating beast to me. His cultivation may not be as good as mine, but if we really fight, he may not necessarily lose. He still has the void-penetrating beast in his hands. If he threatens this sun with it, it will really make things difficult for this sun. Void-penetrating eye, void-penetrating eye, this true monarch has finally obtained you. When I refine you, my divine power will definitely reach a higher level. At that time, even if I have to face Saint One, I won't be afraid. Sun Jian's figure disappeared, and the gap also gradually closed up. Finally, he disappeared among the palm-sized snowflakes. After 2 hours, Xiao Hua's figure slowly appeared on the left side of the gap. He also had a thoughtful expression on his face. He also pinched his chin with his hand and looked at the gap. Who is this Sun Jian? He is almost a Taoist spirit severing stage cultivator, especially that Kunlun mirror and the three-pointed, double-edged sword that can break the void. They are definitely not ordinary. Could it be that this Sun Jian is a member of a first-class family? While talking to himself, Xiao Hua patted his forehead with his hand, and the Dharma eye slowly opened. However, Xiao Hua didn't use the heavenly eye. Instead, the silver white eye slowly turned into a pure silver white. The silver white eye slowly rotated, and then a silver brilliance fell on the space where the gap was. Open! Xiao Hua shouted in a deep voice. The silver light beam roared, and with the rotation of the light beam, a small gap in the void also appeared in the air. Ha! I see. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He stretched out an eye and quietly looked inside. He smiled and said, the delusion breaker Dharma eye has such an effect. If it wasn't for the void-penetrating eye of the void-penetrating beast, this Xiao wouldn't have thought of it. With the Dharma eye, this Xiao can remember the location of this snow mountain. After Lu is settled, this Xiao can also return to the hidden immortal continent through the space meridian. Then, Xiao Hua turned his hand again, and a fist-sized silver bead appeared in his left hand. It was condensed from the void-penetrating beast's light beam that rushed into the space, transformed by the delusion breaker Dharma eye in Xiao Hua's left hand. This is the essence of the void-penetrating beast that Sun Jian was talking about. Xiao Hua swept his gaze and sent the silver bead into the Dharma eye imprint on his forehead. He said with a smile, if this Xiao can refine the essence of this void-penetrating beast, I'm afraid that the delusion breaker Dharma, and heavenly, I will rise to another level. Ha ha ha! Xiao Hua was really happy. He raised his head and laughed loudly. That laughter shook the surrounding snowflakes into powder. Xiaohua thought for a moment and looked at the snowflakes that covered the sky, which blocked his vision like this. It even covered the snow mountain that he was on. Then, he directly descended and used his divine sense to mark the snow mountain with his divine sense. Only then did he release his Buddhist sense and looked around. He casually found a piece of clothing that wasn't a Taoist robe from the space and put it on. Then, he didn't fly far, but landed on the snow mountain. He stepped on the snowy ground with large strides and walked down the mountain. Because in his Buddhist sense, he already saw that there was a temple built on the mountainside of the snow mountain. The snow was very heavy, and the snowflakes were the size of a palm. They fell on Xiao Hua's bare head, and also fell on Xiao Hua's nondescript clothing. They even fell on the foot of the snow mountain. The snow on the foot of the mountain was at least a foot thick, and under the layer of snow, it was extremely smooth. It was obviously a thick layer of ice. In this kind of weather, ordinary cultivators would release their true qi to protect themselves. Cultivators who cultivated to the gold core realm would have a protective golden light. Even if they didn't do it deliberately, they would still be able to block all the dust, raindrops, and snowflakes outside their body. However, Xiao Hua was an exception. Although he didn't like dust, sometimes he also liked raindrops and snowflakes very much. Just like now, he withdrew the protective golden light and didn't even leak a trace of true qi. Previously, he slightly revealed his Confucian cultivation base, but now he was completely concealed under the secret soul cultivation technique. He was like an ordinary young man, walking step by step on the snow mountain. His whole body was already snowy white. If Xiao Hua wasn't walking, others would definitely not see such a white dot in this vast white world. The snow mountain was extremely high, and the small temple was built halfway up the snow mountain. Xiao Hua walked down the faintly discernible mountain path step by step, and it took him no less than 2 hours. During these 2 hours, Xiao Hua's heart was like the world in the snow. The dust in his heart was slowly washed away by his slow steps. Even the impetuousness in the void and the bloodthirst from using the demon world's blood drop paradise gradually subsided. Once again, Xiao Hua's state of mind was like an ancient well without ripples. Although Xiao Hua couldn't see the nascent soul in his lower dantian, Xiao Hua could clearly sense that the newborn nascent soul was also sitting cross-legged in the original location of the nebula, in his lower dantian. Its hands were forming hand seals, and it was cultivating with its 5 hearts facing the sky. Seeing the corner of the small temple on the side of the pine tree not far away, the corner of Xiao Hua's mouth curled up. He looked left and right, and the path under his feet had already appeared. The place covered in snow was obviously a bit shorter than the other places. Xiao Hua stepped on the path, but in his heart he secretly thought, "This Xiao's nascent soul is a bit strange. Not to mention that all the meridians in my body are opened. Even the image of my nascent soul is faintly discernible. Previously, when it climbed out of my body and arrogantly pointed at the world, I could still see its shadow, but when it entered my dantian, it disappeared. Also, although this nascent soul looks like me, but why does it look like a huge nebula most of the time? Even the color of its skin is very different. Not to mention when it's hidden. When it's revealed, it's not necessarily black and white or 7 colors. As the saying goes, the appearance is born from the heart." This Zhao's Dharma idol is naturally this Zhao's image, and that spiritual idol Dharma body is also the image of this Zhao's nascent soul. Naturally, this nascent soul should also be this Zhao's image. This is without a doubt, but why does it often give this Xiao the illusion that it's a nebula? Nebula? Thinking of a nebula, Xiao Hua's body trembled, and he was stunned on the spot. The heavenly Tao, starry sky? Isn't the heavenly Tao, starry sky made up of all the nebulas? In other words, the nascent soul is not born from me, but from my Tao foundation. The nascent soul is the result of my cultivation. I have succeeded in comprehending the heavenly Tao. Although it's only in the so-called heaven glimpse realm this heaven glimpse realm, is also integrated into my Tao foundation, and now it's manifested in this nascent soul. Heavenly Tao. Oh, heavenly Tao. Only the heavenly Tao is the pinnacle of my Tao cultivation. Even if I cultivate a nascent soul, I still have to rely on a nascent soul to strengthen my Tao foundation, and use the nascent soul to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Since the foundation of the Tao sect is the heavenly Tao, then what is the end of the Tao sect cultivator's cultivation? Also, the foundation of soul cultivation is the 9 heavens of spirit origin. What is the pinnacle of soul cultivation? Xiaohua, who had made great progress in his Tao sect cultivation, couldn't help but have a shocking thought. The foundation of Confucian cultivation is the 5 Qis unification. What is the pinnacle of Confucian cultivation? The foundation of Buddhism. What is it? It can't be Buddha Saraira, right? The pinnacle of Buddhism is Buddha. Is it the fruit of Buddhism? Dang. Right at this moment, a muffled sound was like a blow to the head. Then, a burst of ice-cold energy fell from the sky, and some even fell on Xiaohua's neck. Xiaohua was startled, and he hastily raised his head, only to see that in front of him was a strange tree that was 9 zhang tall. When he lowered his head to think, he bumped into the tree trunk, and with this collision, the snow on the strange tree's branches and leaves fell down one after another, revealing a half-chi long leaf that looked like a heart and also like an eye. Chapter 3394. Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the leaf, somewhat astonished. Under the heavy snow, the leaf was still verdant, without the slightest trace of wilting or yellow. The contrast between the snow white and the green of the leaf made the vitality of the green leaf even more obvious. Looking at the tree trunk that he had crashed into, he realized that it was different from an ordinary tree trunk. This tree trunk was several feet in size, and it was not an independent tree trunk. Instead, it was formed by dozens of tree trunks clustered together. These dozens of tree trunks were rugged and coiled together into a cluster. Each of the individual tree trunks was strong and powerful, and the bottom of the tree trunks was deeply embedded in the snow-covered foothills. When he reached the middle of the tree trunk, these dozens of tree trunks coiled together into one. Branches, leaves, and leaves spread out from the top of this tree trunk, covering an area of several hundred feet to his left. What kind of strange tree is this? The pitiful Xiaohua came from the barren Dawn Rain continent of the Buddhist sect, so he naturally didn't know the origin of this tree. He inwardly wondered. This tree doesn't look like an ordinary spiritual tree. But if it isn't a spiritual tree, how can it still maintain its leaves and branches so green in this heavy snow? Thinking of this, Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the small temple not far away. He smiled and said, "Wouldn't it be fine if I go over and ask?" The small temple wasn't big. It was comparable to the Jiangshao Mountain Range's Jiangshao Temple. Moreover, the front of the small temple was covered in snow, and there were no traces of anyone passing by. Xiaohua already knew that this must be another dilapidated temple. When Xiaohua arrived in front of the small temple, he turned his head and looked at the winding footprints he left behind along the way. A kind of understanding appeared in his heart. Wild geese leave their sound when they pass by. People leave their names when they pass by. This Xiao only occasionally passed by this mountain and left behind such a heavy snow. Although the sky is clear after the snow, and no one knows this Xiao's journey. But what about this Xiao's heart? What about this Xiao's memories? What about the great master of this temple? Forget it, forget it. A person's journey, the shadow of heaven and earth, the chaos of the world. Who can understand? Xiaohua suddenly felt that he seemed to have aged a lot. Everything would make him sad. He hurriedly shook his head and looked at the plaque above the small temple. Young, Ling, Wangxi. The signboard of the temple was clearly written in Sanskrit. Xiaohua could also be considered to be able to read it, but this signboard was truly very old. It looked almost as old as the spiritual herbs in Xiaohua's space. Therefore, The writing on the signboard had long been blurred. Xiaohua tried to decipher it a few times and simply gave up. He lifted his foot and was about to walk up the steps to knock on the similarly tattered temple door. Suddenly, Xiaohua stopped because the steps in front of the temple gate were abnormally clean, with only a few snowflakes drifting down with the wind. It was clear that someone had just cleaned it. Xiaohua hastily retreated a few steps and shook his body. The snowflakes around him flew up, revealing Xiaohua's unusually dry clothes. But just as those snowflakes were about to fall, Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something. With a wave of his hand, all of the snowflakes once again landed on his body. Then Xiaohua extended his hand and wiped his head. Then he patted his body several dozen times, shaking off most of the accumulated snow. After leaving a portion of the accumulated snow, he respectfully stepped forward and knocked on the bronze ring on the temple's door. Dang, dang, dang. The sound of the door knocker wasn't loud, but it was very clear. Amidst the shuffling of the falling snow and the whooshing of the breeze, the sound of the door knocker spread far and wide, however. After a moment, he didn't hear any sound coming from inside the temple gate, nor did he hear any footsteps. I know. Xiaohua tentatively pushed the door. The temple gate was unlatched, so when he pushed it open, there wasn't any screen wall in front of him, but rather a small open space. The first thing that entered Xiaohua's eyes was an orange-red mass. When Xiaohua focused his eyes, he could already see clearly that it was a monk wearing strange orange-red clothing lying on top of a pile of snow. On the other side of the monk was a half-swept open space. Seeing this, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. Just as he was about to fly over to rescue the monk, he saw the motionless monk's entire body twitch. Then, slowly and with great difficulty, he curled up from the ground and crawled up. At this moment, Xiaohua could see clearly that this was an old man who was over 60 years old. The skin on his face was very dark red, and his entire face was covered with wrinkles, just like a walnut. Under his snow-white eyebrows, there was only a kind of turbidity in his eyes. The old monk stood up. First, he looked around. Then he slowly bent down and picked up a strange orange-red hat that looked like a coxcomb from the ground. He carefully knocked off the snow on the hat, then carefully put it on his bald head. Xiaohua could see clearly that although the old monk was careful, there seemed to be a problem with his eyes. Cleaning the hat was completely based on his intuition. At the end of the strange hat, there were a lot of snow that he didn't knock off. After putting on the hat, the old monk bent down again with great difficulty. He picked up a broom from the ground and slowly started sweeping. Although the old monk was sweeping, he was sweeping too slowly. The snowflakes in the sky were too big. Just as he swept, another snowflake fell. It was as if the old monk hadn't swept at all. Xiaohua quietly stood at the entrance of the temple. He didn't make a sound, nor did he approach. He only silently watched. This old monk was completely different from Seven Suns Temple's Daoshan. One was in the hidden immortal continent, the other was in the Western paradise. One was a disciple of the Tao sect, the other was a disciple of the Buddhist sect. However, in Xiaohua's eyes, the two of them didn't seem to be any different. The broom that the old monk waved was very similar to the spoon that Daoshan used to give porridge. They were both so firm and so persistent. Seeing that the empty space wasn't that big, the old monk swept it for the time it took to eat a meal. When the old monk turned around, the entire empty space was covered in a layer of snow. This empty space was a small square in front of the temple's main hall. It wasn't like the steps in front of the temple that were blocked by eaves. Seeing that the old monk didn't say anything and didn't even raise his head and started sweeping again, Xiaohua could only cough. The snowflakes were so big, and the old monk's movements were so slow. Xiaohua didn't doubt that unless the snow stopped, the old monk would never be able to finish sweeping. Unfortunately, Xiaohua's ordinary cough didn't attract the old monk's attention. The broom was still sweeping the empty space. Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the somewhat gloomy main hall. After hesitating for a moment, he still released his Buddhist sense. After taking a rough look, he knew that there was no one else in this temple other than the old monk. Xiaohua could only walk in front of the old monk. He clasped his hands together and called out, Amitabha Buddha. Elder, how are you? The old monk acted as if he didn't hear Xiaohua's words, or perhaps he was simply unfazed by the chaos. He snorted and ignored Xiaohua. After sweeping several feet in front of Xiaohua, he seemed to have suddenly understood. He slowly raised his head and looked at Xiaohua with his murky eyes. When his gaze landed on Xiaohua's bald head, he slowly hugged the broom in his arms and clasped his hands together. Amitabha, you've finally come. I'm finally here? Elder, what do you mean? Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. However, he wasn't surprised because in Xiaohua's eyes, the old monk didn't see his face at all. He only saw his bald head. Other than the old monk mistaking him for someone else, he didn't make any other guesses. Elder, you mistook me for someone else, Xiaohua said with a smile. Everything about the old monk was slow, whether it was sweeping or speaking. However, since the old monk spoke, the old monk didn't pay attention to Xiaohua's words. He asked again, What is your Buddhist name? The old monk's words just happened to interrupt Xiaohua. Xiaohua faintly smiled. He knew that the old monk didn't listen to his words, so he replied, I don't need to mention my Buddhist name. That's right, Xiaohua didn't shave his head. He wasn't an orthodox Buddhist disciple. Where does Buddhist name come from? However, the old monk seemed to be able to understand at this time. He nodded slightly and said, Oh, so you're called Bodhi. Bodhi? Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This old monk was really good at interrupting. He actually found his Buddhist name in such a short time. The old monk was even more interesting. After saying this sentence, he picked up the broom again. He seemed to have forgotten Xiaohua and started sweeping the snow again. He swept for a moment before he stopped and said slowly, Bodhi, my Buddhist sect doesn't seem to have this seniority. Oh, right, little monk, you're a layman disciple of my Buddhist sect? Yes, I'm a layman disciple. Xiaohua thought for a moment and could only reply. He didn't enter the Buddhist sect and cultivated the Buddhist sect's cultivation method. It was appropriate to say that he was a layman disciple. However, Xiaohua was very doubtful whether the old monk heard him say this sentence, because after saying this sentence, the old monk started sweeping the snow again. It seemed that if the snow didn't stop, he wouldn't stop sweeping. Besides sweeping the snow, he didn't do anything else. Xiaohua sighed. He knew that his purpose of inquiring about information wouldn't be realized. After thinking for a moment, he bowed and said, I won't disturb the elder's cultivation. I'll take my leave. Just as he stood up, the old monk raised his head again. His turbid eyes didn't know whether he was looking at Xiaohua or at the temple door behind Xiaohua. He said, This poor monk has been waiting in this Shaoling Long temple for 90 years. Now, this poor monk has reached the point where the oil lamp has dried up. Calculating, you should have come in 2 days. This poor monk has finally completed the mission of my Shaoling Long temple and led the future Buddha to the Pure Land world. Boom! In an instant, Xiaohua's bald head seemed to be bombarded by a pillar of awe-inspiring qi. When Xiaohua heard the words Shaoling Long Temple, he immediately thought of his exquisite leaf scripture. When the old monk said the words future Buddha, although the old monk's words were very soft and even somewhat inaccurate, in Xiaohua's ears, it was almost like a bolt from the blue. Large beads of sweat seeped out from the top of his head. His whole body was slightly swaying. Looking at the monk sweeping the snow in front of him, an indescribable strangeness arose from the bottom of his heart. Chapter 3395. Elder. Xiaohua's voice is almost trembling. He stares at the old monk and says tentatively, I just came here to ask for directions. How did I become the future Buddha? Unfortunately, the old monk lowered his head again, turning a deaf ear to Xiaohua's words as he continued sweeping the snow. How could Xiaohua, who had already planned to leave, move again? He stood there quietly, staring at the old monk without blinking. His Buddhist sense had been fully released, covering the entire Shaoling Long temple. His eyes were full of disbelief, and his heart was thumping wildly. He was thinking about the credibility of the old monk's words. Snowflakes were still falling, and there was no wind in the Shaolin Long Temple. The old monk had just swept 30% of the courtyard when Xiao Hua made up his mind. There were too many unimaginable things in this world. Jiuxia's art of clairvoyance, the Shaman King's art of divine connection, and his hand of karma. Jiuxia could predict that he would appear in Huan Kingdom. The Shaman King could predict that he would appear in Ming Mountains, and this senior of the Buddhist sect could predict that he would appear in this Shaolin Long Temple 90 years ago. It was nothing, and Xiao Hua chose to believe it. However, Xiao Hua was still puzzled. How could this old monk recognize him at a glance? Could it be that he knew that he would come today? Or did the senior of the Buddhist sect leave behind an image? If he knew that he would come today 90 years ago and left behind an image, would that senior know about his lost treasure in the Western Ocean? Or perhaps, if he had changed his appearance when he was forming his nascent soul in the void, would this old monk still be able to recognize him? Looking at the old monk sweeping the snow, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the seal of ocean-turning seal flew out of the void and rushed into the sky. Its bronze brilliance covered the entire Shaolin Long Temple tightly, and no more snowflakes would fall. The old monk naturally would not look up. He swept the snow in a yard with a broom and suddenly raised his head again. He did not care whether Xiao Hua was beside him or not. He opened his mouth and said, "Beauty, don't be surprised." When Master accepted this poor monk, he had already said that the mission of Xiling Long Temple is to wait for the arrival of the future Buddha Lord. If a disciple can't find another disciple in his life, then he will definitely be able to wait for the arrival of the future Buddha Lord in his life. After saying this, the old monk swept the snow again until all the snow was piled up in the corner of the courtyard. Then, he trembled to the door of the main hall, carefully placed the broom next to the thick pillar, bent down with difficulty, and randomly chose a row of large vats. He removed the wooden lid on the vats, took out a small wooden spoon, scooped up the water in the vats, and drank 2 mouthfuls. He wiped the water stains on the corner of his mouth with his strange monk robe, and said, "This poor monk has tried every means to accept a disciple in his life, but he has never accepted a disciple. Therefore, this poor monk knows that the glory of welcoming the future Buddha must fall on this poor monk." However, this poor monk still didn't expect that the Buddha would come so late. It's so late that this poor monk can't do anything for the Buddha. "Elder," Xiao Hua walked in front of the old monk and asked with a smile, "Elder, what's your Dharma name? Elder, why do you suddenly think that I'm the future Buddha? Could it be that no one has ever come to the Shaolin Long Temple?" This poor monk's Dharma name? Don't mention it. This poor monk doesn't even remember what it's called. This time, the old monk really heard Xiao Hua's voice and replied, "It's not that no one has ever come to my Shaolin Long Temple." Usually, there are monks who stay, and there are also devout benefactors. However, if it's someone like the Buddha who doesn't speak the language of my pure land, then there's not a single one. To be a disciple of my Shaolin Long Temple, being able to communicate with the Buddha is the most important thing. This poor monk often talks to himself when he has nothing to do, so he won't forget these words. Moreover, as he spoke, the old monk opened his mouth again and actually used the language of the Dawn Rain continent to say, "Could it be that the Buddha wants this poor monk to say these strange words? These words this poor monk can't say too much." Of course, the old monk's words were very jerky, and even some of his words were inaccurate, but Xiao Hua heard it clearly. This was the language of the Dawn Rain continent that he hadn't heard for a long time. How is this possible? Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. His previous doubts were all gone. He had forgotten that the writing and language of the Pure Land and the hidden immortal continent were different. Just as he entered the temple, he spoke the language of the Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent to the old monk, and the old monk also responded accordingly. Now that he thought about it, just now, the old monk really seemed to be talking to himself. Now that the old monk actually spoke the language of the Dawn Rain continent, how could Xiao Hua not be surprised? What happened next was even more out of Xiao Hua's expectations. The old monk didn't bring him to the main hall of the temple and didn't say much to him. Instead, he walked to a small house on the left side of the temple. Not long after, a burst of smoke floated out of the window of the small house, and then a kind of faint fragrance floated out from inside. Xiao Hua didn't follow. Now that he was surprised, he walked to the door of the small house and stuck his head out to take a look. This small house looked like a kitchen. There was some neatly arranged firewood inside, and there was also a small stove. On top of the stove, there was a small iron pot. At this moment, something was cooking inside. That thing looked very viscous, and along with the fire, it rolled around with a gurgling sound. When the fire under the stove was gradually extinguished, the old monk took out a pot and two crude big bowls from the wooden cabinet next to the stove. Using his withered hand, which only had bones left, he picked up the small iron pot and poured the viscous liquid into the pot. Then he took out several bottles and jars from the wooden cabinet and took out some ordinary-looking ingredients and put them into the pot. The old monk picked up the pot and slightly shook it a few times. Unexpectedly, some yellowish liquid was poured out from the pot. When the two big bowls were filled, the old monk carefully picked up a bowl and handed it to Xiao Hua and said, "This is my Snowy Mountain special butter tea. Try it." This thing was this poor monk's favorite 10 years ago. In recent years, in order to maintain this poor monk's body, I haven't used it for a long time. Since you've come today, this poor monk will also satisfy this craving. Xiao Hua smelled the aroma of the butter tea, and there was a strong, meaty smell inside. He was quite unhappy in his heart, but when he heard the old monk's words, his heart was slightly sour. Respectfully taking the big bowl, Xiao Hua said, "This poor monk thanks Elder. Thank Elder for guarding this place for more than 90 years." Finished speaking, Xiao Hua raised the big bowl and drank the butter tea into his stomach. A warm feeling came from his stomach, and even more so from the bottom of his heart. The old monk naturally didn't have Xiao Hua's good appetite. He only drank half of it, but he couldn't drink anymore. With a sigh, he put the big bowl on the stove, looked at it with some regret, and said with a bitter smile, "After not drinking for so many years, this poor monk is afraid that he can't drink anymore." Xiao Hua's eyebrows jumped, and he said with a smile, "If you didn't meet me, then it would have been fine. But since you let me come to Shaoling Long Temple." At this point, Xiao Hua hurriedly shut his mouth. He didn't dare to say anything else. It seemed that before this, as long as he had the intention, there wouldn't be a good outcome for anyone who took the rejuvenation pill. And the old monk in front of him was already on the verge of death. Xiao Hua couldn't guarantee that his rejuvenation pill would be effective on him. The old monk didn't listen to Xiao Hua's words at all, nor did he look at Xiao Hua. He immediately said, "Buddha wants to thank a lot of people. This poor monk is only one of them. Shaoling Long Temple has been built for 9,999 years. If we wait another 9 days, then it will be 10,000 years. This poor monk doesn't even know how many generations Shaoling Long Temple has passed down. Only the Bodhi tree outside Shaoling Long Temple was planted when Shaoling Long Temple was built. It has witnessed the wind and frost of Shaoling Long Temple for 10,000 years. Xiao Hua was shocked again. He looked left and right at the dark room. He really didn't expect that this ordinary temple, without any Buddhist formations or Buddhist lights, would have such a long history. "Buddha Lord, please follow this poor monk." The old monk didn't even lift his eyelids. He slowly walked out of the small hut and walked to the left side of the main hall. He pushed the door, and the door opened with a click. There were more than 10 cabinets inside, which were densely packed with scriptures. Behind these cabinets, there was a tall Buddhist shrine with many Buddhist archives placed inside. The old monk pointed and said, "This is my Shaoling Long Temple scripture pavilion. Buddha Lord, in the future, you must read the scriptures here word by word. In my Buddhist sect, although divine abilities are important, the Dharma is the most important. This? Xiao Hua wryly smiled and opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to answer. He really came to ask for directions and wanted to know where he wanted to go. He really didn't come to be the future Buddha Lord and didn't want to read any Buddhist scriptures in this Shaolin Long temple. The old monk didn't wait for Xiao Hua to say more. He reached out and closed the door of the main hall. Then he brought Xiao Hua to the right side of the main hall and pushed the door open. There was a thick pagoda in the main hall. This pagoda didn't have any Buddhist lights and even looked a bit rough and simple. Moreover, it looked very strange. Layers of railings and stairs were built outside of the pagoda. This is my Shaolin Long Temple's pagoda. Since the establishment of Shaolin Long Temple, all of the disciples' relics are here. After this poor monk passes away, a relic will be left behind. Buddha Lord can place this poor monk's relic on top of it, and this pagoda will be complete. Every day, we will chant and pray for Buddha Lord arrival. These relics are filled with our willpower. When Buddha Lord achieves enlightenment, they will be of great use. The old monk's tone was as calm as water. He pointed at the pagoda and spoke in a very natural manner. It was as if these relics were the butter tea that Xiao Hua used earlier and not the true fruits that Buddhist disciples refined for dozens of years. I hope that everyone can read it for free. In addition, fellow Taoist Xianqing has also written a book called Seeking Venerables in the Nine Heavens. Although it is just the beginning, I know that writing a book is not easy, so I hope everyone can support me. I thank everyone on behalf of fellow Taoist Xianqing. Chapter 3396. Xiao Hua smiled wryly. Back on the Dawn Rain continent, he had seen the visions of the Tusada heaven and the Kiliacosm of worlds, and knew that the exquisite Leaf Sutra was a technique cultivated by the future Buddhist Lord. But he had never considered becoming the future Buddhist Lord, nor could he ever have guessed that in the great snowy mountain, in the exquisite Leaf Temple, there would be so many monks waiting for him to come. Not only would they pray to him every day, but they would also hand over their sariras after they died. Xiao Hua was even more aware that although these relics all carried their own karma, they all had a common obsession. Therefore, if he wanted to achieve the Buddha fruit of the future Buddha Lord, swallowing these relics would definitely be beneficial to him and not harmful to him. However, could Xiao Hua swallow these sariras? The old monk seemed to have seen through Xiao Hua's thoughts. Of course, it was more likely that he had already prepared the wording. Helping the Buddha Lord to achieve enlightenment is our obsession. Moreover, if the Buddha Lord achieves enlightenment, the sariras will merge with the Buddha Lord. It will also be of great benefit to us. Buddha Lord doesn't need to think too much. Okay, Xiao Hua nodded, but he didn't make a decision in his heart. Seeing Xiao Hua nod, the old monk closed the door again. He walked to the front of the main hall and looked at the closed door. The future Buddha Lord hasn't come yet. The main hall of my exquisite temple doesn't worship incense. It only opens the door at the end of the year. Now that the Buddha Lord has finally come to the exquisite temple, it's the day when the main hall of my exquisite temple opens. From now on, all the tantric temples in the Pure Land can worship incense. Tantric? Xiao Hua was stunned. He thought of his Buddhist seal catalog. Wasn't that thing from Tantric? I'm afraid the Buddha Lord hasn't shaved his head, and he doesn't have a certificate or a Dharma name, right? The old monk looked at the closed door with some excitement and whispered something. Indeed, Xiao Hua didn't deny and replied, the Buddha Lord's Dharma name doesn't need to be based on seniority. The seniors of my exquisite temple said that the future Buddha Lord's Dharma name is what it is. The Buddha Lord's name is Bodhi, so his Dharma name is Bodhi. The old monk continued. However, this Dharma name is used before the Buddha Lord attains karma. After attaining karma, he can only be called Namo Dang Lai Xiametheya. At this point, the old monk seemed to have thought of something. His walnut-like wrinkles rippled with joy. It's the fortune of my 9 lifetimes to be able to shave the future Buddha Lord's head and introduce him to Buddhism. I will definitely attain karma in my next life and become Namo Methriya. Seeing the happiness on this old monk's face, Xiao Hua's heart gives birth to a kind of reverence. This was a joy that came from the bottom of his heart, a sublimation of his faith. Just like the Seven Sons Monastery's Dao Shan, when he saw the leftover porridge in his mouth fall into the mouths of the beggars, he would feel blessed. Every day, when he lit the incense on the wooden tablets in the main hall of the Seven Sons Monastery, he would feel that this was a sign of the Taoist sect. Shanzai Amipa. Xiao Hua felt the same in his heart and bowed. When the old monk heard Xiao Hua recite the name of Buddha, he felt comfortable no matter how he heard it. He stretched out his hand and was about to push open the door of the hall. However, just as his finger touched the door, he retracted it and very naturally patted his extremely wrinkled forehead. He seemed to be muttering to himself again. You see, this poor monk is really old. The Buddha Lord is going to shave his head today, so naturally, he has to make some preparations. First of all, the worries of the mortal fetus on his head must be removed. Next, the Buddha Lord needs to bathe and change clothes. Elder, Xiao Hua smiled and said, "This one, Buddha Lord." Unexpectedly, the old monk's ears were very sharp. Xiao Hua just opened his mouth and waved his hand, saying, "The word 'this one' is used by laymen to express humility. The Buddha Lord has not yet shaved his head, so he can call himself that. However, after shaving his head, he can no longer call himself that. This elder, this poor monk, is also unworthy of this title. If you call me old monk, this poor monk is already very satisfied. However, all monks call themselves monks, poor monks, and so on. The Buddha Lord will definitely attain Buddha fruit in the future, so you can't be so humble. Calling yourself this one, or just me, is also good." Me? Xiao Hua was somewhat confused. Isn't this a common way of calling yourself? The old monk smiled and said, "The Buddha Lord really hasn't shaved his head, so you don't know much about Buddhism. The Buddhist scriptures that my exquisite temple has collected over the generations, the Buddha Lord must consider every word carefully." Yes, this one knows. Xiao Hua readily accepted, unwilling to make this old monk unhappy. Hearing this, the old monk slightly nodded and pointed outside the temple, saying, "Let's go, Buddha Lord. This poor monk will take you to the warm water by the mountain stream to wash up. We'll talk while walking. Elder, don't leave the temple. Right now, the sky is filled with wind and snow. It's very inconvenient." Xiao Hua hurriedly said, "Elder, you only need to tell me the location." "Alas, fine." The old monk lowered his head and looked at his hands and feet, saying with a bitter smile, "This poor monk's eyes are blurred. My hands and feet don't listen to my orders. To be able to see the Buddha Lord on the last day is already a blessing. To speak of serving the Buddha Lord, this poor monk's strength is truly beyond my reach." The more the old monk spoke, the more fluent the Tibetan Immortal Continent's language became. Many words popped out. It was clear that in these 90 years he had put in a lot of effort in this aspect. Although the old monk didn't need to send Xiao Hua down, the old monk still insisted on sending him to the temple's entrance. He even said while walking, "The Buddha said that the immeasurable life sutra said, thus the small kings scattered, heard that the great king's wife had a wife, came to congratulate her, brought gold, silver, precious treasures, clothes, and the fragrance of flowers, respectfully offered tribute and praised. Immeasurable wife, raised hands to welcome, didn't want to trouble. Since the wife, heaven offers the taste of the masses, nourishes the essence, naturally full, didn't serve the imperial chef. October was over. The crown prince was born. On the 7th of April, the wife went out, past the refugee tree. Flowers bloomed. When a star came out, the wife climbed the branch, fell to the ground from the right side, walked 7 steps, raised hands. Heaven and earth. Only I am honored. The 3 realms are suffering. I should be at ease. At the same time, heaven and earth moved. 3,000 great thousand karmic earth. All were enlightened. The 4 kings of Shurfan. along with the officials of the dragon ghosts and deities, Asuran, all came with guards. There were the Dragon King brothers. One Garuda, two Garudas. The left rain warm water, the right rain cold spring. Shurfan Mo wrapped the heavenly clothes. Heavenly rain and the fragrance of flowers. Playing the zither and drum music. Burning incense. Pounding the fragrance of flowers. Voidside Fortress. The first Buddha of the Buddhist sect was born with the words, "Only I am honored in heaven and earth." Although the Buddhist sect hasn't achieved fruition yet, and hasn't even shaved, the word I is worthy of it. The old monk recited the Buddhist sutra as if he was familiar with it. He even slowly explained it to Xiao Hua. Naturally, there was a lot of Sanskrit mixed in. Xiao Hua listened as if he didn't understand, but this "only I am honored in heaven and earth" was clearly heard. "Good," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "This seed understands. Many thanks for elders' teachings." Nemo, Buddha. At this point, the two also arrived outside the temple. Although the outside of the temple was completely different from the inside of the temple, the old monk didn't see it at all. He very naturally pointed to a place and said, 999 feet under the Bodhi tree, there is a pool bestowed by Buddha. My Shaolin Long Temple's disciples all bathe and shave there. Yes, elder, please return. After this seed has bathed, I will return to the temple. Xiao Hua followed the old monk's finger. His Buddhist awareness swept over and immediately saw the location of the pool. He hurriedly said to the old monk. The old monk's eyes were still turbid. He looked left and right, not knowing whether he saw Xiao Hua or not. But he said, "Yes, this poor monk will go prepare a monk robe for Buddha Lord. This item is also something my Shaolin Long Temple has prepared. After Buddha Lord bathes, change clothes, and shave." Then, when Xiao Hua heard about shave, his heart jumped. He hurriedly asked, "Elder, the Buddhist precepts, Buddha Lord, rest assured." The old monk had already prepared the words. His dry mouth cracked open, and he said with a smile, "Buddha Lord came from afar. Naturally, you don't know the precepts of my tantric sect. My tantric sect is different from other sections. We don't prohibit meat and fish, marriage. Buddha Lord, rest assured, tantric sect doesn't prohibit anything. Besides, you're the future Buddha Lord. Don't you have the final say in all the rules and prohibitions?" That's good. Xiao Hua was slightly relieved. He immediately thought of the butter tea the old monk just drank. There was a meat and fish taste in it. After speaking, Xiao Hua's feet produced auspicious clouds, and he landed toward the pool. The old monk unexpectedly didn't know. He still said with a smile, "My tantric sect is a small branch of Buddhism. We only worship the future Buddha Lord. These precepts were set by Buddha Lord Tathagata. How can we follow them? I won't hide it from Buddha Lord. In the past, this poor monk also had a relationship with the secular world. It's just that it's been too long and there's no news about it." The old monk said a few more words. Seeing that no one answered, he knew that Xiao Hua had already left. He slowly turned around and walked toward the main hall of the temple. Just as the old monk was about to push open the door, his body suddenly leaned against the door. As the door opened, the old monk's body fell to the ground again. After half a meal's time, the old monk's body shook a few times. He then slowly climbed up from the ground. He turned his head left and right and sensed that he was in the main hall. A trace of tears slowly flowed down from his turbid eyes. He then walked to the only shabby praying mat in the main hall. He knelt down and kowtowed to the incense table. He whispered, "Namo Mithriya Buddha, this disciple's life is coming to an end. Only a few people will know about this disciple's life. This disciple disdains others to know about this disciple. It's fine as long as Buddha Lord can see it clearly. This disciple shaved his head when he was young and has accompanied Buddha Lord for more than 90 years. Since Master returned to the West, this exquisite temple has been guarded by this disciple alone. After more than 60 years, this disciple has finally seen Buddha Lord's body in this life. This disciple's lifelong wish has been achieved. My exquisite temple's mission can be considered completed. This disciple knows that this disciple should be assisting Buddha Lord's body in reading Buddhist scriptures. In the end, this disciple will accompany Buddha Lord on his journey. But this disciple is unworthy. This disciple can no longer endure the laziness of this body. I don't want to stay in this world anymore. Namo Methriya Buddha. This disciple sincerely asks for Buddha Lord's forgiveness. This disciple sincerely asks Buddha Lord to take this disciple back to the Western paradise. Chapter 3397. The old monk's words were close to Sanskrit. Not to mention Xiao Hua was not here. Even if Xiao Hua was here, he would not be able to hear it clearly. After the old monk kowtowed, he shakily walked out of the main hall and came to a small hut. The hut was very simple. There were only a few old wooden cabinets. The old monk fumbled around in the cabinets and took out a black wooden box. After opening it, there were more than 10 boxes inside. Most of these boxes were empty. Only the bottommost boxes had a few thumb-sized black beads. The old monk stretched out his shriveled finger and took out a black bead. He slowly put it in his mouth, but after hesitating for a moment, he put it back into the box. His turbid eyes seemed to be staring at a certain place in the air. After a moment of pause, he picked up the bead again. After a few times, the old monk finally put the bead back in a box. His mouth trembled as he whispered, Namo Methriya Buddha. Disciple asks Buddha for forgiveness. After saying that, he closed the wooden box and put it back into the wooden cabinet. Then he slowly walked out of the hut. Xiao Huan naturally did not know that Tantra Buddhism had always thrived in the snowy mountains. Their living environment was the most bitter and cold. In order to reproduce, in order to cultivate Buddhism, it was impossible for them to forbid meat and marriage. Xiao Hua wanted to refine Buddhism's cultivation method and become the future Buddha Lord. It seemed that only by shaving his head and becoming a monk could he truly learn the true essence of Buddhism. In this way, this Tantric Buddhism branch was suitable. Moreover, the exquisite leaf scripture was originally the cultivation method of the future Buddha Lord. This exquisite leaf temple had been waiting for Xiao Hua on this snowy mountain for tens of thousands of years. Everything seemed to be a matter of course. However, Xiao Hua, who was flying in the air, was actually moving very slowly. He could not help but think in his heart, this Xiao just came to ask for directions. Really, just to ask for directions. I don't have any other thoughts. How could I encounter such a strange thing? Although Xiao Hua had already used divination to convince himself in his heart, when he thought about how he was about to become a monk and become the future Buddha Lord, which was more powerful than Guanyin Bodhisattva, he could not help but mutter in his heart. This exquisite leaf temple. It was actually built 10,000 years ago just to wait for this Xiao. 10,000 years ago. Even I don't know where I was. Since this Buddhist sect senior from 10,000 years ago already knows of this Xiao, then does the current Buddhist Lord also know of this Xiao? Besides, although I've been expelled from the Imperial Thunder sect, I'm still a genuine disciple of the Tao sect. What's the point of shaving my head? Even Frost Bamboo didn't really shave his head to become a monk, right? Xiao Hua had already thought of this before, but now, he couldn't help but think about it carefully. This was because the thought of running away in Xiao Hua's heart was growing stronger and stronger. If he wasn't soft-hearted and couldn't bear to see the old monk's sincerity, he would have already run away in a sorry state. The key point was that Xiao Hua didn't want to hurt the old monk's heart. And even more, he didn't want to fail to live up to the painstaking efforts and expectations of who knows how many generations of Shaolin Long Temple's abbots over the past 10,000 years. Xiao Hua really wants to run away. The temptation of exquisite leaf temple is too great. Not only are there Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques of the Buddhist sect, there are also so many relics. If Xiao Hua has these things, the cultivation of the Buddhist sect will definitely skyrocket. However, although Xiao Hua is greedy, he still can't bear to blacken his heart to such an extent when it comes to the painstaking efforts of others over the past 10,000 years. He uses his own false thoughts to swindle others and swindle them to pretend to be some future Buddhist lord. Go or not go? Xiao Hua's heart was still wavering even when he flew above the hot spring. To go or not to go is really a difficult problem, making it hard for him to make a decision. The hot spring in front of him is several zhang in size. It is on the side of the cliff between exquisite leaf temple and the foot of the mountain. The hot spring is filled with steam, melting all the snowflakes that originally fell into the hot spring into threads of water. The threads of water slowly fall down and merge into the unceasingly rolling water surface, disappearing in a moment. The water of the hot spring is azure. Between the rolling water, it is like a boiling crystal. Near the hot spring, there are many spiritual herbs, swaying under the steam of the hot spring. Further away from the hot spring, and several zhang above the hot spring, there are piles of several feet of snow. The white of the snow and the blue of the hot spring complemented each other. It looks very pleasing to the eye, like a brilliant green bead inlaid in a white jade. Wonderful! Xiao Hua is vexed. Seeing such a refreshing scenery, he unconsciously claps his hands and praises. Then, looking at the clear hot spring, he really has the impulse to take a bath. Let's go and wash. Perhaps my mind can calm down a bit. Xiao Hua's figure descended. Standing at the edge of the hot spring, he shook his head, as if he wants to shake off the depression in his heart. Roar! At this moment, a tiger's roar suddenly came from the distant mountain path. Then, a gust of wind blew, causing Xiao Hua to wrinkle his brows. When he raised his eyes to look, at the foothills of the mountain about several zhang away, a white tiger of several feet in size stepped on the snow and rushed over. Wherever its four hooves passed, huge plum blossoms fell on the snow one after another. Seeing that it is just an ordinary white tiger and has not become a spirit, why would Xiao Hua be afraid? He also didn't release any pressure or Buddhist sense. He only stood there and coldly watched. Who would have thought that the white tiger would fiercely rush over? Its fierce and dignified tiger eyes swept over Xiao Hua. It only stared at him for a moment, then unexpectedly shook its head and wagged its tail as it walked to the other side of the hot spring. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed several stalks of spirit grass growing on the side of the hot spring. Then it used its claws to wipe its big mouth. Like a cat, it rolled a few times on the other side of the hot spring. Then it stuck out its tongue and licked a dozen or so drops of congealed hot spring water on the spirit grass on the left side. Then it actually roared a few times at Xiao Hua. It cheerfully explored some kind of rhythmic pace and quickly walked away. Xiao Hua, who was standing at the edge of the hot spring, was somewhat stupefied. In his eyes, these ferocious beasts, which one of them wasn't vicious? Which one of them didn't pounce on a person when they saw him? Which one of them didn't want to feast on a cultivator's blood essence? This white tiger in front of him, could it be that its nature has changed? It doesn't eat meat anymore. It doesn't want to drink blood anymore. Paradise! Paradise! Suddenly, Xiao Hua was somewhat enlightened. A person's paradise naturally has no sorrows, no worries, and no worries about life and death. Although there might not be such an extreme paradise under the Buddhist sect, beasts don't eat humans, and humans don't eat meat. I'm afraid it's possible to achieve one or two. If the Buddhist sect really has such a great ability, then what can I do even if I shave? Xiao Hua had heard a lot of Taoist slander about the Buddhist sect on the Xiaoyu continent and the hidden immortal continent. He also saw the Confucian cultivators' disdain for the Buddhist sect, and even more so, he saw Frost Bamboo's cunning and Xing Chen's hypocrisy. He already had a prejudice against the Buddhist sect in his heart. Now that he suddenly saw the old monk's piety and the white tiger's obedience, he couldn't help but have doubts in his heart. He even had the thought of using other people's stones to polish jade. But when it came to the crucial moment, shave, there was still a knot in his heart. What he wanted was the Buddhist sect's cultivation method, not the Arhat's cultivation method. But if he didn't shave, he wouldn't be able to obtain the Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques of the exquisite temple. Of course, Xiao Hua could also obtain the Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques from other places, but hadn't the exquisite temple's Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques been waiting for him for 10,000 years? How could Xiao Hua not feel conflicted? Xiao Hua, who was struggling in his heart, took off his clothes and fell into the pool with a plop. The temperature of the pool was just right, and the depth of the pool was just right. Xiao Hua, who poked his head out of the pool, let out a long sigh. A kind of comfort that came from the surface of his body slowly seeped into his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. Along with this kind of comfort, Xiao Hua's soul felt like it was about to fly out. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the mist lingering in the air. Xiao Hua's mind was completely blank. This blankness only lasted for a moment. Suddenly, Xiao Hua's body shook. His slightly narrowed eyes suddenly opened, and a light green brilliance appeared between his eyebrows. It instantly covered his entire body, and then rushed into the pool and into the stone wall of the snowy mountain. Xiao Hua's open eyes gave birth to a kind of clarity. That clarity was like a clear mirror pouring water over Xiao Hua's heart. Not only did Xiao Hua's eyes seem to have torn away a thin layer of gauze, even his heart seemed to have torn away all the filth, and his heart became much brighter. What's going on? Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. This Xiao's Dao foundation hasn't stabilized yet. Could it be that it's the effect of forming a nascent soul? Xiao Hua. While he was puzzled, a faint voice sounded in his mind. This voice was filled with joy, and even carried a trace of trembling. Hearing it, Xiao Hua felt his heart tremble. Who is it? Xiao Hua was stunned. If it was Little Yellow or Little Black, they wouldn't call him. Moreover, they would only talk to him in his mind after entering the space. Little White. Xiao Hua even took a moment to wake up. After all, Little White almost never took the initiative to communicate with him. Today was the first time. Almost without thinking, Xiao Hua hurriedly rushed his mind to the mysterious dark clouds. At this time, the mysterious dark clouds were different from before. Now, not only are the heavenly marks and earth deeds deeply engraved on the surface of the mysterious dark clouds, the green aura entwining the heavenly might had become much denser. Above this green aura, there were many golden threads. These golden threads would overflow from time to time within the green aura, flickering with the intensity of the green aura, as if they were breathing. In addition, the lightning between the heavenly marks and earth deeds had also become much thicker. Those broken threads were even more connected, strand after strand. Some were dense, some were thin, but each strand seemed to have endless power. Last time, Xiao Hua had already tested the powerful aura of the Great Desolate Era within these broken threads. Now that the broken threads were so complete, how could Xiao Hua dare to try again? Quickly come in. Little White urged again from within the mysterious dark clouds. Xiao Hua, who was standing outside of the mysterious dark clouds, could sense Little White's urgent breathing and dragon roar. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.